Is the recording on? Just so you know, meetings are recorded. My name is Jane Dolan. I'm the president of the Flood Board. So I'm saying good morning to my fellow board members. We'll acknowledge Mr. Wright when Mr. Valines when he shows up. We do have another mic. I get them all confused. And our staff. And I see folks in the audience. Happy to see faces and welcome to our meeting. Who is monitoring those who are participating online? Travis. So everybody has been admitted? Do you see Mike Valines in that at all, or is he going to walk in? No board members there. Okay. All right, so we're logged on. Hope you all feel welcome. And I'm going to officially call this meeting of the Central Valley Flood Protection Board of Friday, October 25th, 2024 to order. First item of business is to establish a quorum. We are missing our board clerk today, so that job has been temporarily given to our executive officer to call the roll. Mr. Leaf.
Thank you, Madam President. Member Andrews?
Present.
Secretary Johnson?
I'm here. Good morning.
Member Bosley?
Here.
Member Griego?
Here.
Member Countryman? Present. Vice President Valines is not yet here. President Dolan?
I'm here. We do have a quorum. We have 6 out of 7 who are present and in the room, and we expect a 7th when he arrives. So I'm going to ask again to our Executive Officer, Chris Leaf. I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask if there are any introductions or announcements to be made now.
I have no introductions or announcements at this time.
We have other things, but they're actually on the agenda, so we'll get to those. I'm going to do just a brief review of the agenda, just so we know the run of the show today. But I won't go into a big explanation because at each item we'll do it there. So this is an overview. First up is approval of minutes. Then we have what is called consent items. These are items that have been determined by our staff and everyone else's review that they are appropriate and ready to be adopted. And so we do that as one item unless someone wishes to take one off for discussion. Item 7 is a written submittal of legislative update by our executive officer, who may or may not wish to highlight an item, and the board may or may not wish to highlight an item. Item 8 consists of one item. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers will provide a levee inspection, a levee system inspection. Our board staff will introduce that. Item 9 is 2 board items. One is action regarding flood preparedness week, and the second is a staff briefing in advance of a board hearing at a later date. Item 10, 2 matters from Department of Water Resources, one being submitted and one for them to give a presentation. Item 11, our own board staff reports of monthly activities are supported. We frequently ask questions on those or ask for comments. Item 12 is for board member comments regarding our activities, meetings, events, committee updates. Item 13 will tell you about our list of upcoming meetings. Item 14 would be a closed session, but there will be one, correct, Mr. Dua?
That is correct.
So then we'll be adjourning. Now, it's always challenging for me to determine whether or not and when we need a break, but I will call a break when I think it's appropriate. I won't do it after the first 10 minutes, however, but I'm pretty sure that we will not be having a lengthy break for lunch. Is that okay with everybody? You'll let me know if you're really hungry and our meeting goes longer than I anticipate. So we'll get on to business. We'll do our first item of action. It's to approve the minutes. So I call on Secretary Brian Johnson.
Thank you, President Dolan. This item is the September board meeting minutes. I've reviewed them. I believe they're in order. And I move that we approve the September 27, 2024 meeting minutes.
Okay, the motion has been made to approve the minutes. Is there a second? Seconded by,
Great.
okay, Mary Jane gets it. Mary Jane. Just past the buzzer, member Andrews. All right. Anybody want to discuss the minutes? Board, audience, online? No? Please call the roll.
Member Andrews,
Aye.
Secretary Johnson.
Aye.
Member Bosler,
Aye.
Member Borrego,
Yes.
Member Countryman.
Aye.
Vice President Lyons is absent. President Dolan.
Yes. The motion passes. The minutes are approved. 6 in favor, 1 is absent. Next item is consent. We have 3 items. I will announce those to see if anyone wants to discuss them. But as I said, these are items considered to be routine, fully vetted, and our staff recommends approval. Item 5A is approval of permit number 19626. It's located in Sutter County, and the project is a Feather River Tow Fence project. Item 5B, excuse me, is approved permit number 19737. The project is in my hometown, the city of Chico, and it is replacement project for the Little Chico Creek Bridge that was built in 1920. Time to replace. Item 5C is to approve permit number 19768. This is an individual homeowner who will be seeking a permit for a detached garage placed on Garden Highway in Sutter County. Those are the 3. Any board members want to remove one for discussion? I see no one. Anyone in the audience want to remove one to talk about it? Anyone online with a hand up? Mr. D'Agostino? No hands raised. So I'll accept a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
There you are. All right. The motion to accept by Board Member Griego and the second by Board Member Countryman. Please call the roll.
Member Andrews,
Aye.
Secretary Johnson.
Aye.
Member Bosler,
Aye.
Member Borrego,
Yes.
Member Countryman. Vice President Lyons is absent. President Dolan.
Yes, the consent items are approved. 6 votes in favor, 1 member absent. Item number 6 is a favorite item for some folks. We're smiling. It's public comment. The public comment is defined as bringing forward items or comments of matters that are within our jurisdiction but are not on today's agenda. So I suspect that we have Mr. Spalding. Is that the only card? Okay. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, President Dolan, board members, Mr. Leaf. My name is Pete Spalding. I'm representing American River Trees, which is a group of neighbors that are very concerned about the work being proposed under Contract 3B from the Lower American River Common Features Project. I want to give you a quick update since our discussion last month. While the Corps continues to sort through the overwhelming number of comments they received, we're going to continue to push for meaningful community engagement, engineering with nature and nature-based solutions, and overall less destructive techniques for erosion control. The recent post of the October newsletter update on the Corps website, and that's the same one that announced at least a 1-year delay in construction for the project, says that our newsletter will be paused and will resume in the spring as we prepare for the start of construction. This is very troubling because it implies that it's going to be even harder to get reliable project details from the Corps. It's already tough enough to get any information about what's going on, but this is going to remove another layer of communication that they provide. So once again, I want to make 2 points. First, I'd like to suggest and encourage you to focus one of your upcoming workshops on something that could be called balancing erosion control and flood protection with the environment. This could be a very general topic, doesn't have to be specific to contract 3B if that would make it easier to get it on the agenda. But you could invite representatives from the local, state, federal agencies, the non-government organizations, and the others who have expressed concern through the CEQA and NEPA process about contract 3B. And you could also invite the Corps, DWR, and representatives from SAFCA. Have a dialogue, ask questions, discuss alternatives, see where they can come to compromise and balance. About 2 weeks ago, on Sunday, October 13th, we took about 50 people on a tour of the project site north of Larchmont Community Park. We took them down, actually walked down to the bank of the river. We showed them areas where trees and vegetation are going to be removed according to the Corps' own preliminary 100% design tree removal maps, and we compared that to the areas on the Corps' own velocity heat maps to show them exactly where there's supposed erosion that needs to be addressed, and show them the velocity of the river at 160,000 cubic foot per second flows. We'd be happy to do that for you and your staff. We can do that on the north side of the river too, in the Oak Meadow Park, Kadima Drive area. Similar type of walk, you can get right down close to the river's edge and see the velocities that are projected for those flows and what is there now. So we continue to be committed to working together, improve the project design by incorporating state-of-the-art modeling, meaningful community engagement, consulting with the Corps' own engineering with nature champions, applying engineering with nature principles and nature-based solutions, and following recent climate change initiatives, including the Biden-Harris Climate Change Initiative and a national 30 by 30 program. The project's already behind schedule, so let's take advantage of the extra time to get a win-win-win: erosion control, flood protection, and a wild and scenic American River Parkway. Thank you.
Do you have that in writing where you could leave it with us?
I submitted it to Jonah yesterday.
Okay, thank you. All right. Is there anyone else who wishes to come forward and you have a public comment, member Countryman? If it's on what we just heard, no, but. Oh, I'm sorry. Sometimes I think I'm an attorney and I should ask you to say that. Just because I've chaired meetings for a while.
Yes.
We cannot engage. Is that correct, Mr. Dua?
It's at the board's discretion whether it wishes to engage or not, but typically the board does not engage.
Mr. Countryman, go ahead.
My simple question,
And hold it up.
my question to Mike is, has the Corps responded to comments that they've received, the 1,000 or so, and have we seen a response to those comments?
I actually have the answer to that. Go ahead, Mr. Wright.
Michael Wright, Chief Engineer for the board. President Dolan's telling me yes, that they have.
Not-
Oh,
Not
no,
yet.
that's,
You got the second word.
gotcha. Yeah, that's my understanding is they have not responded yet.
That's confusing. Thank you.
Ms. Buckley.
Andrew
Deputy.
Buckley, Deputy Executive Officer. We're working with the Corps and non-federal sponsors currently to address all the comments. We're still in that process right now.
When is that process projected to be completed?
Early next year.
I'm interested in seeing this response to comments. That's the gist of my question.
Of course, we'll make that available when that activity is completed.
I'll just say that there's many of us that are interested in that. Hundreds, in my opinion. Did you have your hand up? Are you to speak on this?
Different topic.
Okay, just getting ready. Okay. Last call for public comment. I see that someone filled this out for you. Because he thought, I'm sure he did that because he thought I'd get your name incorrect, but I know it's Mr. Engler.
I did not fill out a card today. I apologize. So
It's all right. You get a C+.
Thank you. Tom Angler, MBK Engineers here on behalf of the Flood Control Association, and haven't been here in several months. So the first thing I wanted to do is just give a formal welcome to Board Member Andrews. Really excited to have her as a member of your board because in my time working with her over the years, it's been very great. She's very intelligent, very professional, and I really think she's going to add a lot to this board. So welcome, Betty.
She's done just fine so far without
I
you.
bet she has. I
We're
can count
pleased
on
to
that.
have her here as well.
The other thing I wanted to bring up is, we've been talking with staff over the months about the permit backlog and finding ways to free this up. And I don't know that we've seen anything formal. I know we've got the permitting portal getting ready to kick off, and I've seen some stuff recently on that. So I know it's getting closer all the time. But we still see 200 plus permits in the staff reports every month that are still in process. It's difficult to find out where some of these are in process. And I just wanted to encourage the board that we maybe get the board staff cord together and maybe do a presentation here in the next couple months to figure out where we are in the process and how we might be able to clean it up. So that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Well, thank you for both of those. A presentation of that permitting is being scheduled. Before you asked. But you emphasized it. Thank you. Anyone else? Did you want to fill out some more cards? Well, then that ends item 6. Anyone online? My temporary board clerk is reminding me of what I need to do.
There are no hands raised online.
Not online. Thank you for the reminder. Item number 7. Now you can switch to being the executive officer. You provided us a written update of pertinent legislation. Is there anything that you wish to highlight? No? Well, then I will. Our staff wrote a very cogent letter, in my opinion. I just wanted to highlight that. The Corps released proposed categorical permissions for Section 408 in an attempt, they believe, and we hope to move that processing along more quickly. And our staff sent a good letter of good idea, and here's things maybe you can think about. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing that, because I know it was probably a group effort from staff. Anyone else who want to make a comment? I don't see the board, audience. Chavez, I should use your last name, but I forget how to pronounce it, so I apologize. Does anyone have their hand up to talk about the legislative report?
There are no hands raised online.
Okay, thank you. And we'll proceed. Item number 8. Someone's coming forward. Item number 8 is a presentation on a United States Army Corps of Engineer levy inspection result for Reclamation District 10, which we just usually call District 10. Isn't that right, Mary Jane? And we have a board staff from Flood System Improvement Branch, Mr. Jeremiah Peak. Welcome and good morning.
Morning. Good morning to President Dolan and all of the members of the board. My name is Jeremiah, and I work in the deferred encroachment section of the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. With me is Emily Green from the USACE, here to co-present some of the upcoming slides with me. The district engineer for the Honcut Drainage Basin is also here, Tony. Today we'll be presenting the inspection results for the Honcut Drainage Basin, also known as RD10 in Yuba County. All right, so here's a vicinity map of RD10. RD10 is located about 50 miles north of Sacramento. The RD10 system helps protect the western side of Yuba County from Honcut Creek on the north, the Feather River on the west, and Jack Slough on the south. Next, Emily has a more detailed view of the Honcut levee system.
All right, thank you, Jeremiah. Good morning, President Dolan and members of the board. Again, my name is Emily Green with USACE. Happy to be here to talk about the most recent inspection. And I'll just go ahead and jump in with some more background information about the system. All right, so here we're looking at a system map zoomed in. The Honcut Drainage Basin is part of the Sacramento River Flood Control Project. It's made up of 3 levee segments and it's about 25 miles long. The levees of this system reduce flood risk to residential and agricultural lands in Yuba County. Here we're looking at a snapshot of the system inspection report card. 3 levee embankment categories were rated unacceptable, which we define as items that are expected to have a negative impact on project performance. The items that received an unacceptable rating include encroachments, animal control, and depressions and rutting. The system is participating in the USACE System-Wide Improvement Framework, or SWIFT program, and they do have an approved SWIFT plan. So therefore, the system does remain active in the PL 8499 rehab program. This slide, we're looking at some representative photos and observations from the inspection report. These 4 items were assigned an unacceptable rating and are expected to have a negative impact on project performance. So starting with number 1 in the first photo, we are looking at the outlet of a 24-inch diameter steel pipe that crosses the levee. The flap gate hinge was observed to be damaged, did not appear operational, therefore the pipe was lacking waterside closure. Photo 2, again, we're looking at the waterside outlet of a pipe crossing the levee. This perspective is we're looking top down. So you're seeing the top of a 16-inch diameter steel pipe where it protrudes out of the levee. The pipe is visibly deteriorating in this photo, and the most recent video inspection results identified significant issues. The likelihood of failure rating assigned was a 5.4, which is associated with the highest level of risk. Photo 3, we're also looking top down at a large hole that was observed adjacent to a pipe crossing on the water side near the levee toe. The hole was measured to be about 12 inches in diameter and was several feet deep into the levee prism. Lastly, photo 4, it's showing widespread animal burrows on the waterside slope. At this location, burrows were observed to be about 6 inches in diameter, and there was more than 2 cubic feet of material observed adjacent to several of the burrows. A lot of animal activity was observed on all of the levee segments in this system. It was one of the primary issues documented during our inspection. With that, I will pass it back to Jeremiah, who's going to show some additional photos and share some more analysis on the inspection.
You step away, any questions? Sure. From the Army Corps? Ms. Green, okay. Mr. Peak, you're back.
All right, so going back into the details of the USACE report card. So you can see in this slide, all of the units highlighted in green are areas that improved between the last system report, system inspection done in 2013 and the most recent inspection in 2022. So as you can see, there's a lot of green up at the top. So that is the planning, preparation, and training for all of these units. That's all been improved to acceptable. Not only has the district prepared all of that, but as you can see along the bottom, the seepage across all 3 units has been improved to acceptable. The district has also made some progress on slope stability, sod cover, and riprap protection on units 1 and 2. Again, as you can see from those green highlighted sections. As Emily mentioned, the system is active in the PL 8499 program, as it has a SWIFT approved by the USACE headquarters in July of 2024. All right, so I have some photos here of some of the observations from the USACE. There were a total of 35 observations categorized as unacceptable with the potential to negatively impact performance during a flood event. So for the first photo, this is an animal control issue. So 16 of the 35 observations were this kind of animal burrows on the levee. This spot had 10 individual burrows with sizes up to 20 inches in diameter. The corresponding spoil piles were over 2 cubic feet of volume, and the burrows observed were all on the land side at this location. There were other locations where there were burrows on both sides of the levee, or just the water side. The next photo, photo number 2, is from the land side of the levee. This photo is interesting because it was taken in 2013, since the area was so overgrown when they did the inspection in 2022 that they were unable to re-verify whether or not it was still there. The next photo, number 3, is of the land side of the pipe number 1 from the USA's report. It had a cured in place plastic liner applied following the inspection as part of a project approved by the board to line a total of this pipe and then 9 others scattered across all 3 units on the district. Since then, the flap gate was also repaired and the pipe is now fully functional. And then the last one, number 4, it's of the water side of a 36-inch culvert. It's a pipe in the as-built, and the flap gate in this inspection was stuck open. I learned that the RD is working with the DWR to evaluate whether or not this pipe can be removed at this point. And that is the end of our presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to ask Emily, the district engineer, or myself. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nicely done. This was your first board presentation and you look like a veteran, so good job.
Thank you.
Countryman.
Thank you, Madam President. If you go back to your chart, it shows the status.
One with the greens?
This one?
Yes, here's what doesn't seem to make any sense to me.
Mhm.
You have culvert discharge pipes not applicable, yet you showed us photos where there was problems. You got closure structures not applicable, but you showed us problems with closure structures. There seems to be a disconnect between the chart and the photos.
That's a good question. You know what that would be?
Good question. So in our inspection process, we typically evaluate pipes crossing the levee under encroachments unless we are certain they are features of the federal project, in which case we would categorize them under closure or culverts and discharge pipes. So all the pipes that you saw in the photos, they were evaluated under the encroachments item. And you also asked about closure structures. So the reason there's non-applicable there is because closure structures we define as gaps in the levee. Typically you'd see them at railroad crossings or road crossings where a closure structure needs to be constructed to prevent water from getting to the landside.
I'm not sure I understand that. I mean, there's a category culverts and discharge pipes. And you're classifying that under encroachments rather than under that category. I don't know. Why is that?
Because the features are considered encroachments. They're third-party operated features and not features of the federal project.
Is there?
Maybe that category should be federal culverts and discharge pipes to make a distinction there or something.
Yeah,
Anyway,
that's a good way to think of it. Yeah.
If they're non-federal, they can be unacceptable, but you're not going to rate them. They're encroachments. Member Johnson, did you have one? Member Grego.
Thank you for your presentation. Glad to see that there was improvements on this particular District 10 area. One of the things that concerns me is the Highway 70. You know, you mentioned in the report that this is an important infrastructure that's there. And just to kind of relate my experience with that is that in that 2017, that was an evacuation route. You know, that's that not only 2017, but 1986, 1997, during the breach on the Yuba and then on the Feather. That route is an evacuation route, whether they're coming from the north or whether we're going to the north or they're coming to the south. You know, it serves as an important piece of infrastructure. And so that levee system that runs parallel to that highway is really important. And so I'm glad to see that there was a SWIFT. That means that there's work that's going to continue on in that area, and that it's still in the 8499 system, you know, for insurance. My question is out of the 35 unacceptable orange observations, you had 19 encroachments. Were those encroachments all like a separate, you know, like utility districts, or are they agricultural encroachments? Could you tell me the bulk of that, of who they are?
Who wants to take that? I see we have the district engineer.
I can address
Maybe
that.
after the,
President Dolan, members of the board, my name is Tony Diaz with MEK Engineers. We represent Reclamation District 10 as their district engineer. Board Member Grego, your question, predominantly those are actual drainage features that have been or under review, that were critical items in the SWIFT that the district is working with DWR and other funding partners to address. Recently, over the past 2 years, or 2-3 years, there's been a substantial amount of funding that DWR has provided to place cure and place pipeliners in these critical pipes, or graded physical pipes rather. That is currently ongoing, or currently completed as of December of last year. A number of the photos that Jeremiah and Emily spoke to earlier, DWR has provided direct funding to the district to have 2 of those features both repaired and 1 removed. The actual pipe, the first pipe that's on the 3rd slide. Excuse me. On the top right, the second pipe, DWR is in the process of executing an agreement with RD10 to have this pipe removed, as it's no longer needed for operation of the system. It's, as you can see, it's that's probably the least tame picture you could have shown there. It's very much so damaged. The first pipe actually has been the flap gun on the first pipe has since been repaired since this photo has been taken by the district, so it's fully operational. The 4th picture on the bottom right is somewhat representative depending upon what time of year you're going along the district. Their animal burrow and rodent management program is currently ongoing, and they track walk the slopes when they can with funding provided by DWR. One more thing, I know this isn't necessarily part of your question, but you kind of touched on the importance of the evacuation route and keeping the system functional during high water events. Over the last year, Yuba Water Agency has invested a substantial amount of money and provided grants to Reclamation District 10 to design and eventually construct approximately 3 miles of seepage and stability mitigation on the Feather River reaches. So as of right now, RD10 is working with a consultant team to design and permit those reaches, and hopefully identify a funding source, either state, federal grants, to construct these projects. So over the next 2 to 5 years, you know, we'll hopefully have something on the ground and see some cutoff walls going in on the Feather River side. So if you have any other questions, please let me know. Thank you for your
I'm
time.
grateful for the information, and I'm thankful that repairs are being done, and, you know, glad that DWR and the water agency has stepped forward to help that come along. You know, most of the time we look at agricultural land, we think, oh, it's just agricultural land. Why are we investing so much money in these levees? But for me, it's the critical infrastructure of Highway 70 that is, you know, needs to have that attention put on it. And also the residents that actually live out there. And it's helpful that Willie from the water agency lives in District 10. So he sees the importance of investing in that structure as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And thank you to the district for actually completing having a SWIFT, because that shows that you are going to, you are and are going to be making improvements. So it's a good thing. It's a great program. Member Countryman. Yes, you may.
I'd like to ask the district engineer a question.
Mr. Diaz?
On the animal control issue, do you have snake problems there?
Not
What kind of
necessarily.
snakes?
Not necessarily. We've seen some activity on the north on the Honcut on Han 1, which is the Honcut Creek South levee. I'm sure they are available, but I haven't heard anything from the maintenance superintendent with the district specifically to snakes. It's more squirrels predominantly that's causing, what we're seeing here on slide 4.
Oh, well, that's a busy squirrel.
But nobody has limited you dealing with the squirrels or whatever because of snake issues.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Oh, you never find garter snakes when you're doing inspections. Any other questions? Was that a hand raise or just not a hand raise? Board members? Any summation from our three presenters?
Thank you very much.
All shaking. Okay, thank you. Any hands up online? I caught it.
There are no hands raised online.
Okay, none online. No board members, no hands up in the room, so we'll proceed. Good presentation, good to see progress, and thank you very much for the information. The photos were very clear.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I'm getting organized.
President, I just want to say
Member Countryman, yes?
it's really makes me feel hopeful when I see progress like this being made on areas that in the past were seemingly hopeless of getting conclusion, especially that Han Creek levee. You know, remember there was no one willing to step up and say they were responsible for maintaining it. And here we actually have action and ongoing work. So it makes me feel like we're doing something right here. Thanks.
And the we is the board and the districts and the local entities and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So yes, this introduction and implementation of the system-wide improvement framework has really been beneficial and upping the inspections. So thank you for that. Do you have anything more, Mr. Countryman? Okay. We will proceed to item 9, which is board items. The first one is one upon which, after presentation, the board will be asked to take action. It's a presentation of the 2024 Flood Week resolution. Our Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Leaf.
Thank you, Madam President, board members. I'm Chris Leaf, your Executive Officer. Flood Preparation Week is an annual event that started in 2012. This year, it is this week, October 19th through the 26th. California regularly experiences drought and extreme precipitation that causes devastating flooding. It is difficult to predict what is to come in the next few months. 2 years ago, much of the state was in severe drought, and NOAA's November 22 forecast indicated a high probability of a warmer and drier winter than normal for California. Over the following few months, we experienced an unusually wet and cold winter. Last year, there was a strong El Nino in place and worries of a very wet winter to come. The Central Valley, however, experienced an oddly average year of precipitation. While we certainly hope for another Goldilocks winter of average precipitation spaced out over the winter with no flooding, the possibility of a series of heavy storms is ever present. So, as we hope for the best, we should prepare for the worst. Flood emergency response and preparedness is a critical component to the board's flood risk reduction priorities as outlined in the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan, and is one of the most important activities we can undertake when managing residual flood risk throughout California. Being prepared to respond to emergencies requires building relationships with local, state, and federal emergency responders, developing information systems, stockpiling materials, training, and establishing reliable communication systems. Staff recommends the board adopt Board Resolution number 2024-09, declaring the week of October 19 through 26 to be California Flood Preparedness Week, and reaffirming that the board is committed to join with others in emphasizing the need for increased public awareness of flood threats. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. I particularly like wishing for the Goldilocks winter. I'd like them to be the way they used to be. Actually, we'd like a bit of a winter, but not all in just 2 days. Anyone want to make any more remarks on the Flood Week resolution or the Flood Week activities? We're going to have a flood operations report later. You can see that. Okay. We're asked to adopt the resolution. Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Motion by member Griego, second by member Andrews. I
A
heard you. By member Andrews. Last call for talking about this. We're going to pray for rain, but not too much. Would you call the roll, please?
Board Member Andrews,
Aye.
Board Member Bosler,
Aye.
Member Griego,
Yes.
Board Member Countryman,
Aye.
Board Secretary Johnson,
Aye.
Vice President Lyons is absent, President Dolan.
Yes. So the resolution is adopted, 6 votes. Say aye, 1 is absent. And we just received a text from our vice president who wanted to let us know he's in Texas at a wedding. So he's not going to be here. And he's actually at a wedding, so he's not going to be online either, so we're going to miss him. We'll not have to look for him anymore. The president and secretary need to sign these. Our next item is going to take a while and people are going to get organized for their presentations. So I'm going to take a very short break. I'm going to say 5 minutes, but we all know about Dolan timing. So 5 minutes. Oh, wait till you hear what I have to say. The board meeting has reconvened. I'm just observing if everyone has taken their chair. And the answer is not quite. All right. You can always tell, you know, in church and movies, at weddings, when things are going to get started. So the volume went down. All right. I've been advised that for item 9B, which is a briefing of maintenance area 20, that our staff is here and ready to do that. But the landowners who wanted to have the opportunity to speak, and they have that right, are not yet here. So we're going to skip that until we see them. Item 10 then, we'll come back, but we're going right now to item 10, Department of Water Resources, 2 items. The first is the written report of what is new over the last month. And we consider it submitted, but I do ask if anybody has a question on it. I don't see board members. I don't see hands raised. Any hands raised online?
There are no hands raised online.
None. All right, then we'll proceed to item 10B. Mr. de Guzman's coming forward. You'll let me know if I said your last name appropriately. Department of Water Resources Flood Operations Center is going to share information on flood preparedness activities. Good morning.
Good morning. President Dolan, members of the board. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Sean de Guzman. I am the manager of the flood operations section with the California Department of Water Resources. As a part of the flood operations section, I actually manage a few different groups, a few different teams. One of those teams being our State Federal Flood Operations Center, led by a senior engineer, as well as a few key staff. Another one of the groups that I help manage is our statewide flood response unit, mostly in charge of maintaining emergency stockpiles of flood fight materials up and down the state, statewide. And then lastly, we also have our regional flood preparedness unit, which is also led by another senior engineer, as well as another few key staff that primarily focus on Delta flood emergency preparedness in the Delta. One of the main things that they work on is our Delta flood emergency management plan. As a satellite to our State Federal Flood Operations Center, we also have a Eureka Flood Center based out of Eureka to kind of address any high water concerns in the North Coast. So anywhere along Del Norte, Humboldt, Mendocino counties. A little bit about myself. I'm actually new in this role, but not necessarily new to flood operations. I've been with DWR since 2007. of which since 2011, I've been with hydrology and flood operations. I actually started as an engineer in the Flood Operations Center for about a few years before moving on to our hydrology group. I was with our hydrology section with our snow surveys and water supply forecasting units for quite some time, for a little over 10 years, of which I actually managed the group for about 5 or so years, doing all the snow surveys and water supply forecasting for that team. Yes.
Did we get to see you on TV when you went up and measured the snow?
Yes, that was me.
And you didn't invite us?
I know some people. Yes, I am new to this role. I started here at the beginning of the year on January 2nd, was my first day with flood operations. However, I was actually doing the snow survey on that day to help the team still kind of transition into the new role. So a little bit about some of our preparedness in terms of our flood season preparedness and what we do with the Department of Water Resources. So there's a few different key aspects of what we're trying to do to basically implement key strategies that work together to ensure local, state, federal, and tribal partners are prepared. We do that through preseason flood coordination meetings, a lot of our partner agency alignment and coordination with a lot of our emergency response partners, a lot of the online resources that we provide and share a lot of that situational awareness. We also we have 2 different grant programs for flood emergency response grants that we provide local assistance to the locals. We also stockpile flood fight materials up and down the state. And then as well as our Flood Operations Center emergency response rosters and training. So starting off with our Flood Operations Center, DWR is actually the lead state agency when it comes to flood emergency response. And we actually coordinate response statewide, not just within the Central Valley, but statewide. Part of the reason why we also have our Eureka Flood Center up on the North Coast. Again, that's why we have that one on the North Coast. So we do have that statewide responsibility as well as Southern California as well. We respond to various types of emergencies such as high water and flooding, large and/or intense storms, earthquakes, tsunamis, dam incidents, you name it. I myself have been with hydrology and flood operations, like I said, since 2011, and have worked every single flood operations center activation since then. So everything from the high water in 2011 to obviously 2017, 2019, as well as 2023. So I'll put my hydrology hat back on here. I'll do a little bit of a recap of this previous water year, which just completed at the end of September. So in terms of our water year 2024 conditions, hydrologic conditions, what we're looking at here, it's a little bit hard to see, but if you're looking at the map of California, you see a lot of green. And what that green is showing you is basically we received about normal precipitation statewide across the state, which was abnormally normal. It's been very, very, especially in my career, I've never really experienced too much of a normal year, but this is probably the closest thing to normal I've ever actually seen. In terms of our precipitation indices, you see 3 different charts here, and these are all the charts for our various precipitation indices that we track at DWR. So this on the top right would be our Northern Sierra 8-station precipitation index. That is essentially the Sacramento hydrologic region, so everything from the Shasta drainage all the way down through the American River watershed. And as you can see there in that blue shaded region is essentially the accumulated precipitation over a water year. You can see if you look really closely, there's actually a solid blue dark line, which represents the precipitation for water year 2024. Which ended just short and just shy of that average, which I believe is just less than 53 inches for an annual year on the Northern Sierra 8-station precipitation index. So again, abnormally normal. You can also see where, for example, water year 2023 was, which is, I believe, that more purple magenta line. I believe that landed right around 66 or so inches. So definitely an above average year, but nowhere in comparison to what we saw in 2017, which was actually our wettest year on record on the Northern Sierra 8-station index, which was well over 90 inches of precipitation. And this is data that dates back to as far as 1921. Looking on the bottom left plot here, you're looking at our San Joaquin 5-station precipitation index. So everything from the Cosumnes River drainage down through about the San Joaquin drainage. And then this one experienced a little bit less precipitation in water year 2024. I want to say it was closer to around 80 or so percent of average for a water year, whereas you can see how much more wet water year 2023 was. And then lastly, moving further south down into the valley there, on the bottom right plot is our Tulare Basin 6-station precipitation index. Again, very similar to what the San Joaquin 5-station looks like, slightly below normal. I want to say the average there is right around 30 inches of precipitation for a year. And so I want to say that ended, can't really see the number, close to around 80% or so of average. So again, abnormally normal. Looking at the snowpack, this is a bar chart that shows statewide snowpack dating as far back to 1950. And this is looking at basically a grouped up together of based off of our snow courses scattered throughout the Sierra Nevada and Southern Cascades, off of roughly 260 different manually measured snow courses that we have. And as you can see off to the far right for 2024, our statewide snowpack was actually 106% of average, so just barely above average. But again, you can see in the last 15 years how much of a swing there's been from wet to dry, with not much of those bars near normal, with the other near normal year in the last 15 years was 2016. But you can also see since 1950 that steady decline in snowpack over the last 75 plus years, especially with the looming threat of climate change and what that has done to our snowpack with those rising snow levels. Moving on to our reservoir conditions and where we stand at the end of the water year. The chart to the left is something that we actually track at DWR. It's based off of 154 different reservoirs that we have across the state, mainly used for water supply. And really what this is showing is that shaded blue region is essentially average reservoir storage conditions from month to month, based off of the water year. So the far left being October 1 and the all the way to the right being September 30th. And so the current, or I should say water year 2024, actually ended just above average, right around 113% of average. I want to say it is that dashed black line. So slightly above average reservoir storage going into this current water year that we are now in water year 2025, and below some of the big wet water years of say 2017, 2023, and even 2019 there. Off to the right is just kind of showing our reservoir conditions at the end of the water year with respect to the topic conservation for flood control as regulated by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers with water management. Let's see here. So if you wanted to actually compare water years 2023 and water year 2024, this is information that is put together by our partners at the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes, CW3E for short. They are based out of the Scripps Institution of Oceanography at UC San Diego. And so at DWR, we have a huge partnership with them, not only with a lot of our AR research, but as well as Sphero. And so what you're looking at here for water year 2023 on the left and water year 2024 on the right. The big thing to notice and point out here is water year 23 actually experienced less ARs than that of this past year of water year 24. So 38 ARs in water year 23 versus the 51 that we had in water year 24. So it's not necessarily the amount of atmospheric rivers that we are experiencing along the Pacific West Coast, but where they're hitting. And that's really one of the big things that we noticed is, as you can see in the left plot here, you see a lot of those arrows, and those arrows represent, I should mention, the various atmospheric rivers that made landfall along the West Coast. And so those arrows essentially represent the strongest form of water vapor, integrated water vapor transport as it makes landfall across the West Coast. These arrows are actually drawn in by our partner, one of the embedded meteorologists that we have that sits with us at the Joint Operations Center in Sacramento that works for the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes. But as you can see in water year 23, a lot of those arrows are actually pointed along the central coast, as well as Southern California, with that trajectory of kind of moving from bottom left to kind of upper right, has that more southerly storm track. So when those ARs made impact along the West Coast, they basically were this really wet sponge. And when they made landfall along the West Coast, and especially the Sierra Nevada and Southern Cascades, we wrung out that sponge, and that's why we received so much precipitation and snowpack in water year 23. In water year 24, you can see a lot of those ARs and essentially those arrows are more so pointed at the Pacific Northwest. So it's really where are those ARs hitting? So coming back to our Flood Operations Center in terms of our preparedness and what we're doing here, in terms of where we did what we were doing in 2023 versus this last year of 2024. In 2023, as we all know, everyone was busy. We activated our Flood Operations Center twice, from January 3rd to January 20th, as well as from March 9th to June 16th. We were activated for a total of 118 days across 266 total staff across the department as well as the board. Some of the assistance that we provided flood fight specialists. We were sending flood fight specialists up and down the state, geotechnical engineers and technical assistants. We were pre-positioning and stockpile and deploying flood fight material across the state in the form of, say, sandbags, muscle wall, everything. We were also doing a lot of the river, reservoir, and snowmelt forecasting to inform a lot of the situational awareness of our emergency response partners. We deployed quite a few incident command teams, as well as a lot of the newer age mapping and modeling that we were doing as a part of our FOC Advanced Planning Unit. And that's something that's relatively newer that we've really done is with our Advanced Planning Unit is we've been able to produce near real-time inundation mapping based off of the hydrologic forecasts coming out of the California Nevada River Forecast Center. A lot different response this past year in water year 24. We did activate our flood center from February 3rd to February 8th for a total of 6 days for a total of 64 staff. We did send some flood fight specialists out. We sent some down to Southern California and Ventura County, as well as Solano County. And then obviously we were producing various river forecasts, which is part of our normal operating duties. Coming back to our FOC emergency response roster. So we have 3 different teams that are essentially formed up by our divisions of flood operations, as well as flood planning and improvements, as well as a few other key divisions and partners within the department. We have roughly 250 or so staff on those rosters, and it's something that we look at on a monthly basis to try to fill those vacancies so that we don't have any gaps in those emergency response rosters. We actually now have 7 incident management teams. We formerly called those incident command teams, or ICTs. We've shifted those to IMTs to, again, kind of align with a lot of our partners with some of the common terminology. So we have 7 IMTs. We actually established a 7th IMT out of Southern California, mostly in response to some of the rainfall and events from Tropical Storm Hillary, as well as the high water in Southern California. Preseason flood coordination meetings. This is something that we are fully in the thick of right now. I was actually just in Merced County at Atwater just yesterday at one of these preseason meetings. But we are hosting 13 different preseason flood coordination meetings with our partners. They're attended by a lot of the emergency preparedness partners, LMAs, cities, counties, Cal OES, California Conservation Corps, CAL FIRE, the Army Corps of Engineers, as well as the National Weather Service. We cover various topics. We have topics covered by our Weather Service partners on the winter weather outlooks, any of the updates that we have with flood operations as to what we're doing. We update everyone on all of our flood fight materials, where those are, what we have and where those are, as well as some of the stuff that we're doing, especially in the Central Valley with our reservoir status. So I've been able to cover some of the reservoir status and as to where we are with the reservoirs going into the upcoming flood season. especially with kind of above average reservoir storage. And these meetings, I should mention, even though you can see those meetings of the counties that are highlighted in blue there, they are actually attended by neighboring counties as well. Even though we are, for example, are hosting a meeting in Tulare County next week, we would expect folks from Kings County as well as Kern County to attend as well. Try not to. Flood fight methods training. So this is one of the things that we can provide with our Flood Operations Center and hydrology and flood operations in general. We have flood fight specialists teach courses in flood fight methods. It's basically a full day course where the morning portion is a classroom portion where they teach how to kind of monitor levee threats and essentially what you would do to fight that flood. We're merely the Band-Aid to get through high water with the Flood Operations Center. And so this number is actually outdated as of this morning. I believe that number is even more than 18 courses, and we have even more coming. I want to say there's 21 more courses that have been scheduled through the end of the year. So our flood fight specialists have been pretty darn busy, especially since we've been promoting this at our pre-season flood coordination meetings. So we've been getting a lot of requests to host more and more of these trainings. All right, a lot of stuff here on our partner agency alignment. So this is all the coordination that we've been doing. I shouldn't say all the coordination, but some of the coordination that we've been doing with some of our partners. One big thing that I should mention with our Flood Operations Center is we're actually switching around our activation levels, something that hasn't really been done before. We typically activate our Flood Operations Center, and we have 3 different levels. We call it extended hours, flood alert, and flood mobilization. We're actually switching that out this year, coming into this water year, and moving to a level 1, 2, 3 activation level. And that's to essentially align with our partners, say at Cal OES, as well as the other EOCs within the state as well as around the country. With a level 3 FOC activation being an enhanced watch, enhanced monitoring, level 2 being a partial activation, and a level 1 is a full activation, where essentially that allows us and opens up the door to any of the disaster service workers that work for DWR, the 3,500 different employees employed by DWR. Some of the other alignment that we have going on, our California Nevada River Forecast Center, which is also based out of the JOC in Sacramento here with us. They're updating a lot of their flood threshold changes. So what we currently know as monitor stage, flood stage, those are slightly changing. In terms of the elevations, those are not changing. It's more so the terminology and the colors. And a lot of that change is because the California Nevada River Forecast Center is moving towards the national standard and what is being used everywhere else in the country aside from California and Nevada. So this is a long time coming. And what we currently know as flood stage is going to be shifting to something a little bit different. It's going to be called minor flood stage. And then there's actually going to be 2 other levels called moderate flood stage and major flood stage. So that's going to be one of the changes. The colors are also going to change if you ever access the CNRFC map. So monitor stage being the typical orange dots that we're used to seeing. Those orange dots are for monitor stage will be now yellow. And then the minor flood stage will be shifting from red to orange. And so there's going to be a little bit of a little mind shift that we have to kind of make where the yellows and oranges mean a lot more of that what orange and red were prior. We've been really involved with a lot of our emergency action plan meetings with a lot of dam operators and any of the dam EAP meetings that we're attending, various coordination meetings that we've been having with Cal OES at the SOC, as well as the Army Corps of Engineers. We're also in the process of planning 2 different separate meetings, community outreach and engagement meetings in Merced and Tulare counties. And so these are community meetings that we're going to be hosting in the evening in Planada, as well as Alpaw. Those are tentatively scheduled for December 11th and 12th. And so yes.
I want to,
Member Countryman?
yes, I had quite a lot of experience in reservoir operations. One of the big problems are that people just refuse to stay in the same job for their entire life. And so you constantly have new people coming in. And the only way to transfer the knowledge of real-time operation is to really emphasize these tabletop exercises. I hope you continue to do that because it's the only way that I've found that you can actually transfer knowledge from the people that had experience to the new people that are coming into role. So it's a very important function.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like we're actually at one of these damn EAP meetings at least once or twice a week, especially now that there are a lot more EAPs that are required for so many more dams. And so we're getting a lot of help, not just from our staff, but various other DWR staff scattered across the department in our regional offices, either in Red Bluff, Fresno, and even Glendale as well.
I'll just interject that Member Countryman kind of undersold his experience. So don't neglect reaching to him.
PL 8499 MOU update. So this is something that we actually did here on October 8th. So not too long ago, just a couple weeks ago at this point. We actually updated our PL 8499 with the Army Corps, and we had a little signing event with our director, Carla Namath, as well as Colonel Hondura from the Army Corps from the South Pacific Division. And this just really solidifies that partner agency alignment with the Corps in terms of emergency response and how we can provide for citizens statewide. If the need were to ever occur, where we as the state, as DWR, were unable to provide that assistance so that we can actually tap on the Army Corps for that type of assistance. So just a real great, strong partnership that we've always had with them. In terms of our flood fight materials, this is something I am extremely proud of our team for putting together. This is actually a screenshot off to the right of this new dashboard that we'll be launching here in the next month. We're calling it our flood fight materials inventory dashboard. And so one of the questions we always get from our partners is, how much flood fight material do you have and where is it? This used to be a static map as a PDF that would be updated when we had a chance. Now I'm trying to update this in near real time as our staff actually inspect a lot of our flood fight material caches and stockpiles so that we know when that was last inspected and what exactly is there. This is going to be peeling back the curtain as to what we have and where it is, and we're just going to be sharing this information with all of our partners. It's an interactive click on the dot, as you can see here, and you can see what exactly is at that location, when it was last inspected, how many sandbags we have in the state, you name it. Right now, we have roughly 4.1 million burlap sandbags statewide. And then of that, roughly 2.1 million sandbags are located in Stockton at our facility, at our Stockton Weber Emergency Materials Transfer Facility. We have fully restocked from the 2023 storm events. We've also been actively coordinating with a lot of the emergency response partners with some of these flood fight materials and actually sending out more of these flood fight material containers. And these containers are Connex boxes. They're 8 by 8 by 20 foot containers that contain 1 mile worth of wave wash protection. That makes up roughly 12,000 sandbags, I want to say 2,100 stakes, and about, I can't remember how many rolls of plastic that is, but essentially able to cover a levee for about 1 mile. We're in the process of actually procuring an additional 21 flood fight material containers and getting those out to our partners. We're in the process of trying to get one out to the Yurok tribe as well, up on the north coast as far as Del Norte County. And then we're also even coordinating with some folks in Mendocino County, as well as even in Kern County as well. We have a lot of these containers that we can distribute, and we're hoping to get those in the hands of our partners as much as we can. On top of that, we're also in the process of procuring another 736 units of muscle wall. If you're unfamiliar with muscle wall, that is essentially that kind of plastic K-rail that you've seen. We fill them up with water, and it makes it so heavy that there's this little lip so that when water actually leans up against it, it doesn't overtop. And so it's a quick way to gain an additional, say, 2 feet or even 4 feet of freeboard on, say, a levee or any type of flood protection you're looking for. Yes.
How do you,
Member Countryman.
where do you get the water to fill those mussels?
We have pumps, and we're basically using the flood water to pump into the mussel wall itself. And so they work with like a tongue and groove system. They're about 6 feet in length. And so it takes 2 people to kind of to carry them, place them. And then it's a tongue and groove system where you place another one of the mussel wall on top or slide it in. And so you're able to get span a long distance and gain additional freeboard. Yeah. In terms of our flood fight material inventory inspections, we are roughly 94% complete. We try to visit all of our locations on an annual basis to ensure that what we have out there is what we actually have. Occasionally, some of these sites are tapped into by our emergency response partners without notifying us. And we always ask that if they do tap into it, they replace it in kind. Because with emergencies, we know that everything starts and ends at the local level. So we want to ensure that what we actually have there is what we know. So those flood fight material inventory inspections should actually be completed here in about a week. Some of our flood emergency response grants. So we have 2 different grant programs within our shop here in flood operations. We have our statewide flood emergency response grant, as well as our Delta flood emergency response grant. Since 2012, we've actually supplied $45 million in local assistance grants. We have a few different rounds ongoing right now for rounds 2 and 3 for our statewide grants, as well as rounds 2 and 3 for our Delta grants. And we actually just awarded our directed funding grants, which was roughly 1.38 million in directed funding for statewide grants to local partners. And a lot of this is to fund things such as flood safety plans, flood fight material caches, so that they can even restock if they haven't already in terms of their flood fight material caches, any types of training and exercises as well.
Generators.
Generators is also on there, yes. We're also in the process of updating our Delta flood emergency management plan. We ran into a couple snags, obviously, with the 2023 water year, so we're releasing it this year in 2024. Oops, sorry. Go back. Can someone click on that animation by any chance? Are you? If you could just click on that little, yeah, thank you. So what is our Delta Flood Emergency Management Plan? This defines the policies and actions of DWR's EOCs, our emergency operation centers, before, during, and after flood emergency incidents in the Delta. So essentially what this plan is looking at is what if there were some type of no notice of catastrophic events in the Delta? Say, for example, you have a large earthquake and that impacts, say, 20 islands. You lose 20 islands in the Delta, you're going to see a lot more of that saltwater intrusion into the Delta, especially into the South Delta, which at that point, that also impacts our state water project and a lot of those exports and deliveries down the California aqueduct. So it's something that we're actively preparing for and working with our partners within the department as well as externally as well. And so this is one of those major things that we are really curious about, and we have these various models that essentially show what that could look like, because this could take maybe up to 6 months or so to restore fresh water in the South Delta if an event like this were to occur. We need a lot of help from the reservoirs upstream to try to reestablish that freshwater corridor. And we have a lot of those big reservoirs that we would need help from. So a lot of the coordination with those reservoir operators to try to clear out a lot of the salinity, I guess, saltwater in the Delta. So it is a plan. And so the thing is that we don't want to just make the plan. We want to actually still exercise the plan. So we're actually in the process of planning out a tabletop exercise. This is an internal DFEMP tabletop exercise. We're going to be hosting that here in December, on December 4th and December 10th. And we're going to be playing for the various EOCs, Emergency Operations Centers, across the department. So our Department Operations Center, our State Water Project Emergency Operations Center, our Division of Safety of Dams Emergency Operations Center, as well as our executives at DWR. We're going to be focusing on kind of the initial response with the Module 1 and kind of what is actually happening there. in terms of, say, losing up to 20 islands in the Delta. Module 2 will look at what are the response and repair strategies to try to reestablish that freshwater corridor in the Delta using various modeling tools. And then Module 3 would be basically what is the strategy and implementation where our executives play. And so we had a similar tabletop exercise in 2021. And Director Namath, one of the first things that she had mentioned when, say, this is the scenario and this is what happens, one of the first things that she mentioned is, well, how soon do I need to call the White House, right? This is that type of emergency where if we're losing a lot of these islands in the Delta, it is a big response. It's not just a response effort on DWR in the flood operations. It impacts State Water Project, obviously Bureau of Reclamation, quite a few folks. That could also mean we're losing roads, major arterial highways. What happens if you lose the Carquinez Bridge? A lot of things that are going on. So with this Delta Flood Emergency Management Plan and this exercise, we also have stockpile rock that we have that's ready to go, because if this type of event were to occur, we have this rock on hand because we know other people are going to be looking for rock and sheet piles and pipe piles. So we already have those things on hand for various channel closure as well as breach closure that we can deploy on a moment's notice. That's all I have. I'm ready to take any questions.
Is this web, no, it's an email address. What is the site that people can go to see that real time of, what are you talking about? You said instead of the static PDF.
Of our
You're going to real time, but I didn't see that there was a way to log on. Is it just for technical, or is it?
It has not officially launched yet. We'll be launching it here in the next month, but we plan on hosting it on a DWR server on our Flood Emergency Management System website so that anyone should be able to access that.
Okay.
The hope is to also eventually include a lot of the flood fight material stockpiles that locals as well as counties have as well. Right, I talked a little bit about the emergency response grants that we've been funding to fund some of those stockpiles. So it'd be great to actually have that information as well, so we can see not only what does the state have, but also the local partners, as well as even maybe even Cal OES. They have quite a few warehouses as well.
So in the meantime, we can all email you for information.
Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. Board members? Member Grego?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. That was really great. I had the opportunity to attend pre-season flood meetings when I was working for Congressman Garamendi. It was held at the Caltrans office there in Marysville. Very informative. It was great for the, flood people to get together and talk about common problems that they were having. And so a lot of value in that. Can you speak to about the fires and the effects that it has on flood control? I know that in 23, that was a big issue, trying to hold back that water in areas that had previously been burnt.
Yes. So I should mention that we've actually been mission tasked as the Flood Operations Center to respond to some of those post-fire mission tasks. We have staff still out today. And so what they're essentially doing is they've been deployed out to the Borel fire, the Park fire, the Boyle fire. I can't remember. There's quite a few fires, and I believe maybe even the airport fire here in Southern California shortly. And so what they're doing is they're looking at some of the structures that have burned, and they're deploying and essentially working with California Conservation Corps crews to install various erosion control measures, such as straw wattles and things of that sort, to try to prevent any of that kind of erosion from those burnt landscapes. Because when you do get a lot of those burnt landscapes, that material eventually turns to be hydrophobic and doesn't really absorb some of that soil. And it's a lot of that topsoil material that eventually erodes away. And so that's some of the things that we're doing with some of the post-fire mission tasking that we've been doing as mission tasked by Cal OES. Yes.
And the monthly paper from Department of Resources actually identifies theirs that they're doing that. I live in Butte County. The eastern third of our county is burned in the last 10 years. And then we got the Park Fire, which went into Tehama, Shasta, Loomis, something else. So even that minor rain that happened a while ago caused an awful lot of silt just storming into the Sacramento River. So sometimes it's intense storms and sometimes it's just a normal storm after horrible fires. Thanks for that.
I will mention this more on a little bit on the fires, specifically on the Feather River watershed. I worked on a little bit of a study here not too long ago, talking about fires that impacted that watershed and basically the inflows into Lake Oroville. And from 2018 through 2022 alone, approximately 57% of that watershed has burned. So that's one of the major challenges that we've had in terms of trying to forecast water supply into Lake Oroville, because obviously if that thing's burned that much in just that short span of time, the real historical relationships and statistical relationships that we've relied on for years no longer hold up. So that's why we've been moving to these kind of physically based, spatially explicit, climate informed models.
You spoke to 2018 to 2022?
Correct.
We're gonna have to add 23 and 24.
Yeah.
Member Bozard?
Yeah, no, I thank you for that great presentation, and I followed your career, and we're really glad you're in this position. It's a really important one. I've spent a lot of my career in the executive branch working on emergency responses to emergencies, and I will say that I think that sometimes people don't understand the increased complexity around flooding. Because it's always a shared responsibility between federal, state, and local governments, which is complex on its own. But then if you add, assets that are owned by the state and federal government, where locals may not have real good understanding of how that works, just requires even more intentional coordination, which is really, I think the state has been a phenomenal leader in that space. So I'm really glad to see you in your new position. I think it's going to be great. I just have a couple questions. One of them is on the flood emergency management, the Delta flood emergency management plan. I would love to get a better understanding of that. And I just don't know if there's an opportunity that we could host a presentation in a workshop or something, because I think that's important. I think one of the things when I came to the flood board that I quickly kind of had this aha moment is it's not just about the 90% of the work which we do is about infrastructure and making sure that we're building the right infrastructure and maintaining the ones that we have, the pieces that we have, but it's also about emergency response, because if you build it, there is, even though we have so much, give so much credit to our engineers, there's just, when Mother Nature is in the room, one DWR director told me, you never know what's going to happen. And so I think it's really important that we're also talking about emergency response, about how we can protect people's life, especially, and property as well. And just really important that all areas of our state understand that. The other question I have, that question was more to our executive officer and our chair. But the other question I have is just, I was excited to see that you have some community meetings in Alpa and some of these other, another community that I can't recall the name right now. That's great. How are you in your position looking out for some of these unincorporated areas of our system, especially in the Central Valley, which is our purview here, and that are at risk? And how are you thinking about planning and emergency response, working with local counties especially?
Yes, in terms of a lot of these community meetings with the actual community members themselves, it's something that we're really trying to get a grasp on, and something we've only really started doing in the last year. In December of 2023, we hosted another community meeting in Allensworth, and so we're actually headed back to Tulare County, to Alpa. And so we've been working with the various county OES in Tulare, as well as Merced County as well. That one's going to be in Planada, and it's going to be one of our top priorities to try to reach out to a lot of those community members, because they may not know what to do during a flood. When we've spoken to a lot of the various county OESs, they've mentioned that 90% of the population is Spanish speaking. So we plan on bringing out interpreters. We're in the process of updating our flood fight methods booklet in a Spanish version, so that we could also provide that information as well. and just making sure that they're aware of whatever type of emergency alerts there are that are available. Because it could happen fast and they may not know what they can do. So just kind of getting out in front of it before the flood season, knowing what are the reliable sources of information to follow, what the county alerts are, who the right contacts are, just be prepared, or be aware, be prepared, take action. Just trying to get a lot of that information out to the locals is what we've been trying to do.
It's a big task, but it's certainly necessary. I used to be a county supervisor. Don't always assume that the counties are going to take care of the small unincorporated areas with that. And it was certainly, we'll tell them to do that. And it might be maybe a suggestion to the counties, perhaps you do not have their information in more than English.
Mhm.
So you can do that as well. Yeah, no, we saw, it was pretty sad and devastating to see the damage and relocation for these unincorporated communities where our workers live. Yeah, okay, thanks for that. Any way we can help, let us know.
Yeah.
Board members? Member Countryman, did you see they're doing tabletop exercises? Okay.
I just wanted to thank Sean for such a complete and detailed presentation. One of the best presentations that's been made here. It's really greatly appreciated. I also wanted to share with you, I started my engineering career with the Corps of Engineers. I went to the hydrology section. And they told me at that time that the average is something that never happens. So you proved them wrong.
Thank you for that. I think even assuming that there's an average for which you can measure other things is just wrong. We don't know what happened 3 centuries ago. We're surprised with each winter these days. So thank you for that.
Yes, absolutely.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
Certainly do appreciate it. Board members, audience, no hands up. Online? No chats? Oh, I got a chat, then I need to bring my mic up to my mouth, so gotta remind the rest of you as well. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Do you see that representatives of the maintenance area 20, are they here?
They are here.
Yeah, okay. However, I'm gonna call a break because I need to. 5 minutes.
All right.
The board meeting has reconvened, and I think you all heard that recording is in progress once again. So we're at an item that we skipped to make sure that all parties are present, and I understand they are. So this, if you're looking at the agenda, not dropping the mic, is item 9B, as in boy. It's a briefing, first of all, from our staff regarding maintenance area 20 boundary descriptions. I know there are others who will talk. This is an information item today, but it is anticipated that at some point in the future, it will become a matter of action at the board. So this is for us to learn. Michael Delazzo of Flood System Improvement Branch will be the staff doing the presentation this morning still. Good morning.
Good morning, President Dolan and members of the board. My name is Mike Salazzo. I'm a senior engineer with the board's Flood System Improvement Branch. I am leading today's informational briefing regarding the preparation of a boundary description for the proposed maintenance area for the Horseshoe Levee System, namely Maintenance Area 20, located in beautiful Yuba County. The purpose of this briefing is to inform the board of the progress made in development of the boundary description since adoption of the statement of necessary work in June, and to receive any comments from the board to assist in that effort. Because this is an informational briefing, no action is requested of the board. I just would like to note that the presentation being shown on the on the up there on the screen is a little bit different than what may have been printed out on your papers, but not dramatically different. If you have any trouble following along, the screen will have the most up-to-date information. And it's not 800 pages. So today's presentation will start with an overview of the existing levee system and the milestones completed in forming Maintenance Area 20 to this point. Next, I will present the information reviewed in this effort and some preliminary recommendations. After that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Manning and Mr. Nevis to discuss an alternative proposal, and then return to offer next steps and open it up for questions. So the Reclamation District, or RD 784 system, is shown in these two figures with the proposed location of MA20 boxed in red in the bottom right. The left figure is a levee unit map for the RD 784. It contains the portions of the Sacramento River Flood Control Project designated by the Department of Water Resources, or DWR, as units, with Unit 7 in the north near Marysville to the units of the Horseshoe System in the south. On the right is the LAFCO boundary map for RD 784 that shows an area in blue within the Horseshoe levee system that is not within the RD's boundaries. This map shows the proposed MA20 levee system with the RD 784 levee units shown in red and the RD 817 Unit 6 levee segment shown in yellow. The combined system is the proposed MA20. The system is bordered to the north by Best Slough, to the west by the Western Pacific Interceptor Canal, and to the south by Bear River and Dry Creek, and east by 40 Mile Road. RD 784 began the MA formation process in 2019. And in March of 2020, RD 817 requested to join the proceedings. In September 2022, the board adopted the statement of necessary work for the RD 784 portion of the Horseshoe System without the RD 817 segment. A statement of necessary work lists the activities and costs necessary to bring a levee into compliance with standards of the federal government and the requirements of the board as an element of the state plan of flood control. In June of this year, the board adopted the statement of necessary work for both RD 784 and 817. That makes all the requirements to adopt the statement of necessary work to have been met. And those are outlined in Water Code sections 12878.1 to 12878.5. So this graphic, as the board has seen before in June, shows a series of steps remaining in forming the maintenance area, all under the responsibility of the board. The current step box in red is for the board to prepare a boundary description and map, and in so doing, analyze the boundary to determine if benefits of flood protection provided by the levee system are shared unequally, and if so, to what extent can zones of proportional benefit be defined within the maintenance area. The results of the benefits analysis determine the allocation of costs adopted in the statement of necessary work. Upon completion of the boundary description, the board conducts hearings to consider public comments and any additional information that would be helpful in establishing the maintenance area boundaries. The board can then choose to move forward and establish the maintenance area boundaries and adopt an order to create the maintenance area before turning it over to DWR to maintain net circles in green. Public comments would be reviewed at each hearing before making a decision. After adopting the statement of necessary work in June, staff after the board adopted the statement of necessary work in June, staff continued with the formation process as directed by the board and initiated modeling efforts to inform the benefits analysis and met with the affected landowners in March, September, and October to discuss alternative approaches. Staff's analysis focuses on what would happen if the levy units of RD 784 and 817 in the horseshoe area that were relinquished to the state would fail. If the state did not intervene to prevent levy failure, who would be affected? The alternative approach is a but-for analysis that removes certain levies within the region to compare a historical state to the current state. The parties continue to work on alternatives to forming a maintenance area, and a possible conservation easement may be an option. That brings me to the beginning of staff's investigation into developing the boundary description. As stated in California Water Code Section 12878.7, the board shall prepare the description and perform all necessary investigations to assist in that effort. So staff reviewed several sources of existing information, such as current LMA boundaries, levee flood protection zone maps, the Army Corps National Levee Database, and FEMA flood insurance rate maps, as well as technical review completed by our consultants. Staff also looked at past examples provided by DWR for guidance. So it's helpful to understand the purpose of a maintenance area when defining its boundaries. California Water Code Section 12878 defines a maintenance area as those lands benefited by the maintenance of a unit of a project. Those units within the MA20 system are shown in these two figures. The one on the left shows a maintained levee system with all design flows contained within the adjacent channels. The one on the right shows an unmaintained levee system after failure with all design flows inundating areas that would otherwise be protected if the levee were maintained. And it's just, those figures are for illustrative purposes, not necessarily depicting what the boundary would exactly be. Staff reviewed, let's see. So the first source of existing information reviewed is the existing boundary of the local maintaining agencies in the area to determine if their assessment authority can be used to fund levee maintenance. The map shows the LMA boundaries, and there's a significant portion that's not within that authority. So while this delineation can be simple to use because the area is already defined, it is inconsistent with the water code in matching flood control benefits to the maintenance area boundary. Staff reviewed levee flood protection zone maps prepared by DWR, which show areas inundated if a levee were to fail. Orange areas shown in the figure exceed 3 feet in depth. Yellow areas are less than 3 feet. The map for the proposed maintenance area is within the red box, the area boxed in red, and follows the RD 784 and 817 levees generally shown in black around within that red box. And the areas outside the MA20 levees are protected by other levees in the system. The maps are required by California Water Code Section 9130 to designate those lands inundated if a levee were to fail. They were prepared based on data and techniques available in 2008 and relied on models developed by the Central Valley Floodplain Evaluation and Delineation, or CFED program, and the Central Valley Hydrology Study, as well as data from the Army Corps National Levee Database. Since then, DWR has acquired better data and is currently revising the maps, but still those maps are a good reference. The Army Corps National Levee Database is another source of information. This map shows the levied area and is the Army Corps' estimate of the lands protected by the levee system using best available information. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, produces flood insurance rate maps, which show areas inundated by different flood events. This map is taken from the National Flood Hazard Layer Viewer. The area shaded in green is labeled Zone A, is a special flood hazard area determined to be inundated by a 100-year flood event. The area shaded in orange, labeled Zone X, is another flood area inundated by a 500-year event or subject to a depth less than 1 foot for the 100-year event. So this map relies on data and techniques from 2011 and does not show the MA20 levees as providing flood protection. This map may change in the future given new approaches in FEMA's mapping and analysis procedures. It is useful for showing flooded areas for insurance purposes, but it's not consistent with the approach for forming a maintenance area where maintenance activities are intended to prevent levee failure given system design flows, which can be different than the 100-year flood event and hydrology. The board contracted MBK engineers through GEI consultants to prepare a boundary map and delineate the lands protected by the levees in the event of levee failure. The resulting analysis fits well with the existing data reviewed and is updated with the best available information. So the study asked, what would be the worst case scenario if a failure occurred at any point in the system and the flows through the channels were at capacity? The study used the 1957 Sacramento River Flood Control Project authorized design flows and data from the newer 2010 Army Corps Central Valley Hydrology Study to model design flow capacities at each levee reach. This is different than routing a 100-year flood event through the system, as water surface profiles along the levee reaches may vary from the capacity of that levee reach. This would not represent the condition of a poorly maintained system that was loaded to capacity and then subsequently failed. Hypothetical breaches at S locations marked with an S next to a number, were modeled in the system following DWR guidelines for preparing a breach analysis and incorporating procedures in FEMA's approach to modeling levee failures. The guidelines suggest placing breaches at strategic points where levees may fail and can be decided based on knowledge of overland flow dynamics, upstream and downstream levee points, and riverine water surface profiles. Breach characteristics can also be determined from historical information, past analysis, and geotechnical information, all of which was used in this analysis. Models were run for a single breach location, and inundation maps were prepared and combined in a composite map to show the maximum depth the area would experience given any of the breaches. So for example, if there was a point placed in the center of parcel 022, which is near the center left of the map, and a breach at location S1 were to happen, and it showed an inundation of about 2 feet, but a breach at a closer location, say S7, showed an inundation of 10 feet, the value of 10 feet, the higher value, was retained for the map, showing the worst case scenario. So the result then is a composite floodplain map that shows the extent of inundation when estimating the effect of a breach at any location in the levee system. The analysis also provides inundation data for specific parcels. So on the table on the left, there's a map ID and there's depths greater than 1 foot, greater than 3 feet, et cetera, all the way moving down to the column on the right, which is the percent of the parcel inundated. That shows the percent of the parcel that is wet at any elevation. And we're using that because that suggests the area that would be dry with a functional levee. So these percentages can be used in defining the maintenance area boundary. In closing out the investigations performed, staff reviewed historical examples of MA formations, but most, if not all, were based on the idea that any land that would be inundated through a breach analysis should be included in the maintenance area. Before year 2000, the delineation was based on physical surveys. Since then, APN data is used to make the determination. In a few recent cases, only the wetted area of the parcel was used in the analysis. In this method, the boundary of the maintenance area would follow the boundary lines of the APNs, but the description would only include the wetted area from the hydraulic model if the area is not completely inundated. This makes sense since the property owner's cost should reflect the extent of the property is flooded. So including an entire parcel when it's not fully inundated and assessing costs on that full parcel seems to unfairly burden the property if it has the least amount of flooding. So this is what staff is considering as its position in forming the maintenance area boundary. The second step in developing the boundary description is determining the uniformity of benefits. Here we looked at whether a parcel is protected by the levee system as a whole or only as a part. Zone 1, shown in blue, is inundated given any breach in the system. A breach could happen anywhere and it would be flooded. However, Zone 2, shown in green, is only protected by the levees along Bear River and Dry Creek in the southern boundary. So a breach in Unit 5 on the Western Pacific Interceptor Canal would not affect them. Therefore, Zone 2 is partially protected by the system. Because the levee system benefits Zone 1 more than Zone 2, the benefits are not uniform, and there is a need to determine the proportional benefit to Zone 2. Staff believes this approach is better than relying on inundation depth because maintenance costs for the levee system should be allocated based on the proportion of the levee system that protects each property. So Zone 2 members should not pay a share of the Unit 5 maintenance costs if their properties are not protected by that unit. This slide shows the proportional benefit calculation based on levee unit length. The benefit of Zone 2 is based on the lengths of the levee segments protecting those properties in proportion to those of the entire system, and that benefit amount is 42%. Maintenance area costs are allocated to each zone based on the assessed value of the properties within each zone. For example, the allocation of costs to Zone 1 is based on the assessed value of Zone 1 divided by the assessed value of Zone 1 and the assessed value of Zone 2 multiplied by its proportional benefit in that equation in the middle of the screen. It is important to note that staff is incorporating only the area protected by the levees in determining the assessed value of the zone within the maintenance area. So even though the map on the right shows parcels extending outside the inundated area, only that portion of the parcel inundated is included in the assessment of value for cost allocation. So the cost allocation can be shown as an example here, where each parcel in the column on the left has a property value and a percent inundated, which the two are multiplied together to arrive at a value for that parcel that would be affected by flooding, and summed at the bottom in the total row right there. This example assumes uniform value per acre and is based on a generic value of $20,000 per acre just for illustrative purposes. This data does not reflect actual data and is based on a few data points in the system. The total value within each zone of the maintenance area is boxed in red, 52 million for Zone 1, 4.6 million for Zone 2. So if the calculation of the cost allocation were carried forward using these equations and formulas, and if the costs adopted in the statement of necessary work are incorporated, the allocation between Zones 1 and 2 would be 96% and 4% respectively based on the total value in each zone of the maintenance area from the prior table. So given the fiscal year 1 and 2 costs, Zone 1 recovery for fiscal year 1 and 2 would be $172,000 and $113,000. For Zone 2 would be $6,000 and $4,000. Again, this data is used to show how the calculations would be made or could be made, and not necessarily the actual costs allocated to each zone. And just to point out that the Yuba County Board of Supervisors determines the rate of assessments for each parcel to cover the estimate for each zone, and it should follow the same manner for collecting county taxes. At this point, I'll conclude my portion of the presentation and turn it over first to Mr. Manning to present his proposal, and then Mr. Nevis for their presentations. So if I could have Mr. Manning. come on up.
All right, that concludes the staff presentation. We're going to go ahead with the alternatives, and then we can have some discussion. So first up is Mr. Manning, representing.
Yes, good morning. Brian Manning, Desmond Law Firm. I'm with representing Michael and Patricia Rue. And I want to kind of rephrase or recharacterize what I'm doing up here. I'm not making a proposal of what the maintenance area boundary should be. I'm giving you our perspective on where we are and how we got here. I guess I'm in control. So this is we're analyzing the boundaries of the maintenance area for Horseshoe Levee. And I can tell you this has been a long time coming, and I appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you all and speak on this. I've been dealing with this for nearly 14 years, back when the issue was first raised by RD 784. So please, it's going to be an in-depth analysis, but I hope it's helpful to you. So as Mr. Zalazo said, the board in its task of determining what the boundaries are for a maintenance area, you look to Water Code section 12878.7, and the board shall make such investigations as may be necessary and may utilize any and all books, maps, or other relevant records. And that's what I'm here to give you today, is what I think are a lot of the relevant books, maps, and records. So in summary, we are looking at two different approaches to this problem. The first approach that staff was providing is the breach analysis. And that's basically punch a hole in the levee and see where the water goes. And how deep. Without regard to where that water comes from, why that water's there, and how much water is there. The second approach that we're looking at is more of a historical, holistic approach to determining why is there water there, was that water there historically, and how much water was there historically, to determine, is there a benefit? And really this is, it's not an engineering problem. It is a policy issue. How is the board going to approach this unique circumstance, which is unlike a lot of what I think I've ever seen, probably what the board has seen. And looking at, from a policy perspective, if a property or properties were not subject to flooding historically, or they were subject to flooding to a lesser degree, less water, less time, and a public project that benefits others puts water onto those properties and creates a situation on the properties that we're talking about that makes flooding worse or makes flooding possible in the first place. Is it a benefit to those owners who are now inundated to mitigate that burden that's been created? That's the policy issue. So we have to look at, I think, why is the water there? Where does it come from? And how much water is there as a result of changes to the natural conditions? So that's where we're going. As I said, I represent Michael and Patricia Rue. They own approximately 1,500 acres in the horseshoe area. It is a majority of the acreage. And their acreage is, and I've got my laser pointer. Their acreage is over here on the kind of the northeast corner, this area. I won't hit you in the eye with it. So it's kind of this area here. They do have some property that's within 784 existing. Majority of their property, about 1,000 acres, is outside of 784. They do have some within 817 as well. And we've been working in coordination with Shady Oaks Ranch and the Gibb family. On this slide, I chose this slide of Mr. Zalazzo's presentation because I think it is illustrative of the issue. And the name says it right there on the left side, the Western Pacific Interceptor Canal. It's intercepting something and sending that water to a different place. It's not a natural thing. It is not a natural channel. It is not a natural stream. It intercepts natural streams. And that's the whole point of this. That's the difference between this and the Sacramento River, the Bear River, the Feather River, the Yuba River. It is an artificial condition that was created by man to help people down gradient. All the lands that you see on the right-hand side in the horseshoe area are up gradient of all the lands on the left-hand side within Plumas Lake. And this next slide, this tells the story. We've done a hydraulic analysis with our engineers from Schaff and Wheeler to show on the left-hand side what are the historical conditions absent the levees at issue here. Where would the water go? And how much of it would be? So you have different shading that shows that on the left-hand side. So all this, oops, wrong button. All this over here, that's deep water, 12, 15 feet right here. And this, so the darker the color, the deeper the water. And the red is the boundary of RD 784. So you can see that historically, based on the modeling, this is where the water went. And yeah. Flooding, 100-year event. Yes. And so that's the historical. On the right-hand side is the existing with the interceptor canal and the levees in place. And it's like that game, spot the differences. This one's not too difficult. Everything in Plumas Lake, that's the name of that area within the red. It's literally called Plumas Lake because there was a lake there. That area is dry. And what you see on the right-hand side, this area is now wet, and down here, it's subject to greater inundation for a greater period of time. This slide kind of tells the story of why we don't think there's a benefit to the horseshoe levee. So I think that in order to, yeah, go ahead.
These are questions from member Countryman.
Does that 100-year flood include Oroville and New Bullards Bar reservoirs, or is it without New Bullards Bar and Oroville reservoir? I believe it is with them in place. I have the engineer, Chuck Anderson, is on the line, but I'm pretty sure that those things are in place. It's not a historical condition. It is a historical condition for the levees at issue here. And the reason why I use that term is because that's what I believe the case law that's relevant talks about in order to determine that. But Oroville and New Bullards Bar weren't built till 1970. So this situation existed, many, many years before Oroville and New Bullards Bar were constructed. Isn't that right? What situation? The flood the flooding, because of the levees in 784.
Yes, yeah. The flooding because of the levees in 784 existed well before the 1970s, and that's kind of leads into my next segue of where I'm going.
Right, but the mapping should reflect that there's no Oroville and New Fuller's Bar, isn't that right?
I don't know. That's not, again, that's not my role of questioning which engineering issue in this historical model is most appropriate. As we've said in our meetings and pre-discussions with staff, if we get to a point where the board says, yeah, I think the historical analysis is appropriate, and I don't think we should use the breach analysis, we can get into those, details of what should be there, what shouldn't be there, how should it be analyzed. I totally am on that same page. I'm not saying this is the final product. What I'm saying is this gives a representation of what the flooding issues are based on our analysis.
Mr. President Dolan, I want to interject here. I know my board is a smart board and they pay attention and they have details, but I'm going to ask that we allow him to give his whole presentation. No, I understand that. And Mr. Countryman is always on point with his questions. So just keep them because he's got a few more pages here. We might be here a long time if we keep interjecting.
Yeah, thank
It's
you.
okay.
No, appreciate it. So it kind of leads into the next segment of my presentation, and that is, how we got to this point. Just a quick history. This is a timeline that I found online by GEI Consultants. It was actually presented in, I think, Zurich, Switzerland. So this is a history of the Sacramento River Flood Control Project, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard, so I'm not going to belabor the point, but I think it's important for this context of what I'm trying to present. So in 1850, the Federal Arkansas Reclamation Act was passed. That's the same year that the state established statehood. And what the Reclamation Act said is any lands that were overflow or swamplands that a state wanted to reclaim for productive purposes, the federal government would turn those over to the state. That's the impetus for kind of why things in this area of Yuba County started to be reclaimed. And this is, I don't know, just kind of a cool pictures of what the existence looked like. So you had, obviously we had significant flooding in the Sacramento Valley, the inland sea as it's been referred to. And you could see the maps and the nice picture of Sacramento. So in 1893, the California Debris Commission was created because there was a significant amount of hydraulic mining that was creating navigation issues in the river and flow issues. And the California Debris Commission was actually a federal commission that focused on getting rid of the problems in the river with sedimentation. And then these are 1907, 1909 flooding pictures. And the reason why I chose these from the significant flooding events that occurred prior to the Sacramento River Flood Control Project is these floods were kind of the basis for the design profiles that were created as part of the Sacramento River Flood Control Project. So we have on the left, that's Oroville, 1907. 1909 is Duncan Hill and Red Bluff. You can see these tremendous amount of flooding. And the reason why these are also important is because this is the same time frame that RD 784 was coming into existence. So in 1908, RD 784 was formed. Reclamation District 784 was formed. Reclamation District 784's purpose was the petitioners desire and propose to have formed and organized into a reclamation district under and in pursuance of the laws of the state for the purpose of reclaiming the lands therein, reclaiming them from floods. They have to do something by any means, or the lands are susceptible to one mode of reclamation or another. So This is what they were trying to accomplish. These are historical maps that show the conditions in the early 1900s. What you see on the left-hand side is a kind of a Frankenstein map from the USGS. And that's over on the, whoops, wrong button, whoops. I was using my later pointer. So over on the left, that's Plumas Lake, Messick Lake. Right over in this area is kind of the where the horseshoe is now. And this area here on the right-hand side, this is an illustrative document that was created by engineers that shows all of the streams and creeks that would flow into the Plumas Lake area and south. So all those blue lines are the natural streams that are intercepted by the interceptor. At least that's a portion of them. So as part of this process, RD 784 was reclaiming lands that were subject to flooding. And this is the boundaries of that. The lands that are within RD 784, those were subject to flooding. The lands that are not in 784, they weren't part of it. They weren't subject to the flooding, particularly in the horseshoe area, down on the lower right-hand side. And you'll see this line here, this right here is not by chance. It is by where the waters were and where they needed to be stopped. So that 784 is created in 1908. In 1910-11, the Jackson Report was adopted as part of the Sacramento River Flood Control Plan by the Reclamation Board Act, and that actually created this Central Valley Flood Protection Board. At the time, there were 427 miles of rivers and levees already constructed, 470,000 acres of reclaimed, 48 independent reclamation districts. Problem was there was a significant amount of levee wars. So your neighbor would build a levee higher, and then you would flood. Well, then I'd have to build my levee higher. And so that created these problems. And so what the Jackson Report was trying to accomplish was creating an integrated system of flood control. And so in 1917, the Flood Control Act was passed by the United States Congress, and it was trying to take what you see on the left-hand side, the inland sea, and turn it into what you see on the right-hand side. You know, pipe passes, channelized rivers, an integrated system for flood control. And the task was a monumental task and a tremendous work of engineering. Part of that was Unit 145 of the Sacramento River Flood Control Project. Unit 145 is one unit. It is not a segmentation of a portion of Yuba County. It is RD 784. And so you can see, this is the operation and maintenance manual. It includes, Unit 145 includes the east levee of the Feather River, south levee of the Yuba River, both levees of the Western Pacific Railroad intercepting channel, the west levee of South Dry Creek, and north levee of Bear River. And what you see on the right-hand side is the depiction by the Army Corps of Engineers of Unit 145. It is an integrated unit, and it has been for 100 years. It works together in unison. That's why it is called one unit of the Sacramento River Flood Control Project. That's what's at issue when we're talking about the flooding in the Yuba County area and now who's protected. And so what we're focusing on right now in this issue is the Western Pacific intercepting canal, which is right here. So it extends up to the north, and it blocks Hutchinson's Creek, Reed's Creek, And then it comes down and blocks Best Slough, which was previously North Dry Creek, South Dry Creek, Bear River. It intercepts all of those waters that we looked at in with the blue lines. It intercepts all that, stops it from going into the bottom of the bathtub, which is Plumas Lake, and redirects it into a man-made channel down into the Bear River, which then goes out into the Feather, into the Sacramento, et cetera. And so what we see is in 1941, the Army Corps of Engineers finished the west levee of the interceptor. And then in 1944, they finished the east levee. And I think it's important when we talk about the horseshoe, you know, it's this, what we've gotten into is this idea of segmentation. The interceptor channel is a channel that is protected on both sides by levees. The west levee is what stops the water from going into Plumas Lake. The east levee, which is the horseshoe, part of the horseshoe, stops the water from going uphill, backing up. And that's what the hydrology shows. So this is a document that shows where the water comes from that goes into the into the interceptor channel. That is the catchment. Tens of thousands of acres. All of those waters from that vast area would have normally gone into the Plumas Lake area. But that entire catchment gets caught by the interceptor channel. So that's what existed for decades, for 100 years, is that project. In 2004, Three Rivers Levee Improvement was formed. Three Rivers Levee Improvement created a flood control project to provide 200-year level of protection to the urbanized or urbanizing areas of RD 784. It built up every single linear foot of levees within 784 except for the horseshoe. The horseshoe is part of 784. It was left out. That was a decision that was made by the Trillia board, but it had consequences. So everybody that is down gradient now has 200-year level of protection. The people in the horseshoe who were part of this unit, integrated unit, have but, I don't know, 10, 20-year level of protection, if that, because they were left out of that decision. And so what happened is 784 had assessment issues. And this is from their engineer's report. Basically, they created an assessment in 1998. In that assessment, there was nothing built in to raise the cost consistent with the, costs rising, cost of labor, cost of materials. So they're stuck at this number, and they couldn't afford to continue to provide the level of maintenance that was necessary. Trillia was formed. It created its own assessment district, and then they decided that we don't want to deal with the horseshoe anymore. We want to take what has been in existence, our 100-year existence, and we want to turn a portion of that over to the state. And that's why we're here. Because they want to turn over a segment of Unit 145 to the state to create a maintenance area. And the idea is now, well, who pays to maintain the horseshoe? Should it be the people that are just within the horseshoe area, or should it be greater amount of people? And so when we look at the analysis that we did the foundation of our hydraulic modeling was to look at the levees in place before 1908, pre-formation of RD 784 in this area. And so you can see in green those levees that were shown on these historical maps. as already being in place. So we're looking at absent the levies at issue, absent basically 784's levies, and which got turned over to the state as part of the Sacramento River Flood Control Project. Absent those, where would the water go? These ones were in existence, so they remained as part of the analysis. This is a video that shows the historical flooding absent the levies at issue. And this is over like a 24-day period. I've sped it up. But you could see before you press play. So here's Bear River. This is Best Slough, Reeds Creek. This area here is, you know, kind of what we've referred to as the horseshoe area. This is Plumas Lake area right in here. So if you can press play. It peaks about 14 days to 2 weeks into this 100-year flood event. So you can see the water's going up and down, but now it's starting to peak. Now we're at the peak. And then it starts to recede. But if you'll notice, the entire time, that's dry. There's less water right here, but that is dry. So that's the result. Is on the left-hand side, you see the inundation. On the right-hand side, you see the existing conditions. I touched on that map, so I won't belabor the point. But this next one, I want to focus particularly on the horseshoe area. So you can see the outlines, creates a horseshoe. Houses, farm ground, and you know, got some houses over here. But I want you to pay, you know, attention to, if you would, to the area that is the horseshoe and see what happens. If you could press play. Those houses are getting wet. They're there now. The bathtub is filling up on the left-hand side. It's all dry and pretty much in the horseshoe. Now we start to see the peak of the flows. And there's where it peaks and then starts to recede. So what you'll see is where there is water in the horseshoe area, it was there for a short amount of time, receded very quickly, not very deep. But you'll notice that this area was dry the whole time. And what the next slide will show, is, you know, you talk about, okay, well, which levees should be in place? Which should Oroville be in place? Should Shasta be in place? Well, the best information that I can glean is where are Reclamation District 784's boundaries. Those lands were the subject to flooding. That's what they tried to reclaim. 784's boundaries coincide. It's astonishing to me because I've been dealing with it so long, but probably shouldn't be. They coincide with where the historic flooding is. That line and then over. It's a weird thing to have it go over, you know, on that line, but that's because the waters did that. The waters did this. Now you have this all dry. These houses are dry. Their houses are being able to be built. People are safe, and God bless them, they need to be safe from flooding. But at what cost? The cost of the people up gradient. These are the lands that would now be subject to a 100-year inundation. And you can see that on the lower left-hand side, it's, much deeper. And that is reflected in this chart, flood depth and duration. What you see here is in the existing conditions, you have 12 feet of water in certain areas with an indefinite duration. Why do you have an indefinite duration? Because there is no internal pumping mechanisms in the horseshoe. There's no internal drainage. There's flow-through pipes that go through the levee that then go into the interceptor channel, but those have to be, the water has to be low enough for them to get out of there. If you see on the right-hand side, you have that same area, you have 4 feet of water for about 4 hours. So you have a much greater amount of water. And if you want to talk about, does this horseshoe benefit people, what benefit does it provide to the levees of 784? Well, the horseshoe levee, if you took it out, those lands that have 200-year level of protection, they wouldn't have that anymore. Why? Because they wouldn't have the freeboard necessary to satisfy the Army Corps of Engineers. Freeboard is required for 3 feet. If you took out the horseshoe levee, didn't exist, that freeboard drops a foot. You're now at 2 feet. You don't have the 3 feet of freeboard. So they can't satisfy the Army Corps of Engineers requirements. That horseshoe area, absent the levee, it's a gigantic detention basin. It's part of the modeling. It is designed to detain those waters. So that's why part of the reason why the freeboard exists. So I think that's, critically important to understand. Now, wrapping up, the reason why I use this term absent the levies at issue is because that's the language from the case law that I think is most on point. And that's the Akins case. And I bring you down to a little bit over to our northwest, the Natomas Basin. So that's what I'm showing here. The Natomas Basin, this is the Natomas East Main Drain. The Natomas East Main Drain intercepts the waters that would be flowing from the west to the east into the Natomas Basin. Natomas down here is the bottom of the bathtub. Why do I bring this up? Because as part of the 1986 floods, when the Natomas Basin remained dry, those lands to the east that you see in blue, those lands were inundated with floodwaters. And the Court of Appeal, after 10 plus years of battling, they found the state liable in inverse condemnation for the damage to those properties caused by the flooding. And I think it's critically important to read what they wrote. The importance of flood control never conferred on the government a privilege to use private property which was not historically subject to flooding as a retention basin in order to protect other property without paying compensation. It is antithetical to the precepts of the Constitution to allow the government affirmatively to burden private property not historically subject to flooding in order to save other property from flooding and expect the damaged property owner to absorb the loss. Most crucially, if the government intentionally diverts water to upstream private property which was not historically subject to flooding, using that property as a retention basin in order to protect lower lying land, imposition of inverse condemnation liability is fair. This is the best. Our conclusion is not based on an arcane distinctions particular to water law, but rather on common sense application of inverse condemnation principles. That's the foundation of our analysis. If the state of California were to be liable in inverse condemnation, that means that they did something for the benefit of others that was on the burden of the few, and they have to pay compensation for it. So that brings us back to the horseshoe area. This is the last slide. This area here, which is north of the horseshoe area, those are the waters that exist there. That area is not protected by an east levee to the interceptor channel. The only portion of the interceptor channel that is levied off is the west side. The east side used to be levied off. It used to be part of the work that 784 did, but it soon came to realize it's not part of the Sacramento River Flood Control Project. So in the 1970s, the state of California had to buy flowage easements over those properties on the north because they were inundating them with waters that were not natural. That's the same hydrology that exists down south in the horseshoe area. It's an unnatural inundation. What the horseshoe does is it mitigates a burden for the benefit of the people in Plumas Lake. So again, I asked, where does the water come from in this breach analysis? That's critically important. Where does it come from? Why is it there? And why is there so much there? That's really the question. You know, this is a back levee. That is a key term. The levee, the Natomas East Main Drain was referred to as a back levee. This is referred to in the State Plan of Flood Control Facilities Update as a back levee. It's doing something that's not natural. And we're talking about, it's not just, hey, you know, these people don't want to pay assessments. They're being asked to carry the burden of potential flooding, and then they're being asked to pay to stop that when it's not a natural thing. And it's rural ground that's used for farming. They need to be protected from imposition that would be critical to their business. And the rural flood protection in Sacramento Valley, the discussion on that documentation, one of the guiding principles of that for this board is that improvements taken together should not redirect hydraulic impacts from one area to another. These rural folks have been left out. They have. The urbanized areas have had billions of dollars investment, and rightly so. The environmental has had billions of dollars of investment, and rightly so. The rural folks in this entire Sacramento River Flood Control Plan update have been left out. The people in Nicholas, the people in Sutter County, what is being done for them? And now the state is saying, hey, on these areas where you weren't subject to historic flooding, we want to ask you to pay for that. That's just not fair. Everything comes down to fairness. You cannot ask them to absorb the loss. So I think when we go forward in analyzing the boundaries, the question should become, are we going to use a simple approach where we punch a hole in the levee, fill up the bathtub, and say, you pay for it? Or are we going to look more holistically at it and say, well, why are those waters there? Who else benefits from those waters being diverted, and who should pay for that? That's what we're trying to accomplish. I think that's what we would ask that you provide guidance to the staff to look at our approach and go into those details of what should be included in this engineering model and what shouldn't. Happy to have those discussions, but we have to get past the simplistic breach model in the first instance. That's not the guiding requirement. You have an opportunity to provide the guidance to your staff to do what's right, to do what's fair. And that's all we're asking. So I thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Oh, sure. And thank you for the time. I appreciate it. Like I said, it's been a long time coming for me. So thank you.
This is Mike Salazzo, board staff. I just wanted to ask the board to hold questions on the presentations until everyone's finished. We do have one more from Mr. Nevis. If he wishes to come up and speak, I'll come back, open up for questions, and we can ask those at that point.
So I understand that we heard one presentation by others, not the board. And now there's a second, and then staff will come after that. Okay.
All right, well, good almost afternoon. My name is Ralph Nevis. I'm an attorney and I represent David and Becky Gibb and Shady Oaks Ranch, landowners that are down in the lower southwest portion of the Horseshoe area. Today, I'm going to pick up right where Brian left off, Mr. Manning left off, and that is fundamental fairness. Let me show you where we're going to go. We're going to talk about fundamental fairness to the landowners. We're going to talk about the history of maintenance area formations. It uses an in-depth analysis using best available information. We're not writing on a blank slate here. You're not writing on a blank slate. This has been done many times over the decades, and I'm going to focus in on how it's been done and how these boundaries have been set in the past. Finally, I'll wrap up with the water code requirements. There really isn't, we're all citing to the same portions of the code, but what's important is how staff applies it and how you direct them to apply it. So fundamental fairness, what does that mean? I'll tell you, it's in our Constitution of the United States, the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution, and recognized throughout the case law. It says that the Constitution protects that a few individuals won't be made to pay for a benefit to the public generally. So when we look at the maps, when we think back to the maps that Mr. Manning showed you, we saw how the Horseshoe Levee as an integrated part of the unit provided extra protection, both as a retention basin and as the east levee of the Interceptor Canal, provided protection to those areas down gradient that stay dry in the 100-year flood scenario. What the water code tells you to do about determining benefits and who is going to pay for a maintenance area, formation, operation, and maintenance, it's right in line with the idea of this constitutional mandate to treat everyone fairly and that the few should not be burdened for the benefit of the many. Water Code 12878G says the same thing, totally consistent. Maintenance area means the area described and delineated, those areas found by the board to be benefited by the maintenance and operation of a particular unit of the project. What do we have here? We have our Horseshoe Levee, part of the unit, helping protect those people down gradient from flooding. So it's right there in the applicable portion of the water code. Finally, going all the way back to the 1870s and California's adoption of New York's field code, it's a simple statement of the law. And it says, he who takes the benefit must bear the burden. It's really important. He who takes the benefit or she who takes the benefit must bear the burden. As you've seen in the maps, there's a benefit being conferred. They should take some of the burden as well. So fundamental principles, and in the end, that's what my clients, the landowners, are looking for. Fair treatment, fundamentally fair treatment that spreads the burden of operation and maintenance of the Horseshoe Levee to all those who benefit, not just those that happen to be adjacent to it. So what does it require? It requires in-depth analysis using the best available information. The history shows us how it used to be done, and I think going back to what board member Countryman mentioned, sometimes institutional knowledge moves on to greener pastures, maybe into retirement. And the way it was done in the past can inform the way it should be done here. So I want to talk about Maintenance Area 16. And I'm going to talk about it for the idea that there can be a very broad geographical scope of an MA boundary, even though you're dealing with a relatively small facility. So according to records that we received from DWR, MA16, it's a levee along the Feather River. It protects 93,000 acres. That's 145 square miles. It protects ag land, it protects Yuba City, it protects live oak. That's how it's described in DWR's own records. It protects land in 2 counties. And all that benefited area is based on a levee that's 4.1 miles long. Not a big stretch of levee, but it's carrying a lot of weight and providing a lot of benefit to many, many people. So the idea that we're somehow constrained to just draw a line around the horseshoe levee and just look on the inside, that's not historically how it's done. There's an analysis to look to see where are all of the benefited properties. And that's what should happen here. And then after you set the boundary, then you get into the zones of benefit. Another important thing about the MA16 formation, and this was in 1986, they took into account the natural and built up environment, other channels, other embankments, railroads, natural contours of the land. All of that came into play. Down gradient. What does this 4.1 miles of levee protect? Who's benefiting? And then apply those assessments across all of the benefited areas. So in our view, MA16's formation shows that the state must, as it has in the past, consider how all the properties are benefited by a facility and the full extent of the facility's impact on flood control in the subject area. And that's what we saw on those maps earlier. Next, MA7, going back to 1956. The report associated with that says, here's what the process entails. Independent engineers and appraisers are employed by the board to determine which lands will be benefited by construction and maintenance of the project levy in question and the percentage of benefits each section within the area will receive. That comes out of the board minutes. And just like the others, MA7, a 12-mile levee along the Feather River, benefits 138,000 acres. That's what's assessed for that relatively small 12-mile stretch. Next, we have MA12, again, 1959. This is up in Colusa County. Very detailed analysis, again, analyzing the natural and built-up conditions, and then making quite an extensive boundary, over 100,000 acres, all for 11 miles of levee, 156 square miles of benefited lands. And again, taking into account all the features as they appear to determine who's benefiting, taking a common sense approach and achieving ultimately an approximation of fairness to those that are found to have been benefited by the levy. So far, based on what we have learned from staff through our meetings and our efforts to continue to work together to try to get past just the breach analysis and that simplistic conclusion, we haven't seen the kind of in-depth benefits analysis that your own history shows should be done. And that's really what we're looking for here. Finally, it gets granular. This is an urban issue. MA9, that's an urban, this is an urban issue, but I think it really shows how detailed this has to go. South of here, Southland Park Hills, Southland Park Terrace. There's an MA form down there, and individual lots in that hilly area of Lamb Park said, we're not benefited. We're too high. We're too high of elevation, so we shouldn't be assessed. The board actually agreed down to a parcel, residential parcel to residential parcel comparison. Again, that level of in-depth analysis using all the available information hasn't been done yet, and we really think it should be here so that we achieve the overall goal, fundamental fairness, and no burdening of the few to protect the many. The water code, this will go quickly. Look, it supports the analysis that Mr. Manning showed and what the engineers have provided. Section 9130 of the Water Code, you heard Mr. Zalazzo mention it. It was up on one of his slides as well. Use best available information, all best available information, not limited information, not just what the local RD gave as a hydrology analysis, the best information. Take the time and do it right. 12878G, I already read that one to you. I'm not going to do it again, but it's up to you to make the determination of delineation of the boundaries, and then within the boundaries of the zones of benefit. 12878.7, that's your zones of benefit. And finally, 12878.8. Actually, that's the zones of benefit. 12878.7 is the one that requires you to make the determinations, all leading to the same conclusion: fundamental fairness and treatment of my clients, the landowners, and Mr. Manning's as well. That levy that they are potentially being asked to fund solely provides a benefit downstream, down gradient, and those folks downstream, down gradient, should be paying their fair share along with my clients. The maps tell the story. You've seen it already. This is what it used to look like if you take away the levee system in a 100-year flood situation. The lines below the white boxes on the right show the flow of water intercepted as it would be heading west, but now it's heading straight south, avoiding the built-up area to the west. And because of that, and because of the contribution of the horseshoe levee, we get, as we should, dry feet, dry foundations, no flooding in the urbanized area to the west of the Interceptor Canal and the horseshoe area. It's the right result. It has to be paid for and funded fairly. That's all I have to say, and I appreciate you spending the time to get into this, and hopefully we can get to a place where we fairly assess benefits. David, do you have anything you'd like to add? Please come forward. This is David Gibb. He's a landowner, and he'd just like to make a couple comments. I'd like to indulge him. Thank you.
Mr. Gibb?
Yeah, just real quickly, thank you for allowing me to say a few words. Just basically, I'll be real brief. Just talking a little bit about what my wife and I do. We own land within the horseshoe levee. We're cattle people. Used to be in the dairy business. Worked for my father-in-law. When he retired, my wife and I took over the management and switched to beef cattle, which we do now. And it's been a great place to ranch, and very productive farmland there. It really does a good job for us. And the other parcels within the horseshoe levee also very productive. And, productive people as well, doing the work. And I consider my wife and myself the same, productive, do a good job. We raise some awesome cattle. Comes at a cost though. Doing a good job and being productive is expensive. And what my request is you carefully analyze what you do going forward, taking into account the consequences of super high assessments would be on us landowners. Profit margins aren't always fantastic. So if, we end up with, it sounds like these assessments could be variable from year to year. You don't really know what they might be. It's possible that they could reach a point where it's very detrimental to the operation of all of us landowners within the horseshoe levee. So again, I guess my point is I really want you to be careful with your analyzation of who benefits and what the assessment should be for us landowners. We're all committed to agriculture and want to continue what we're doing, and so any kind of like I say, careful consideration would be very much appreciated by us landowners. Thank you.
Back with us, Mr. Zalazo.
Yes,
Okay.
there's no real need to bring up my presentation. I did have one last slide, but I just wanted to go over some of the next steps that, thank you. Okay. Just the next steps would be for board staff to incorporate the comments from the board in preparing the boundary description in anticipation of any future hearing that might adopt it. And so the next steps would be outlined in that graphic in establishing the maintenance area boundaries. Before opening up to questions, I did want to acknowledge the hard work of DWR and the floodplain management branch in assisting and providing information for this presentation, as well as our own board staff for their diligent efforts in trying to resolve this issue. And I also want to thank Mr. Manning and Mr. Nevis and their group for their work, their professionalism, their respect, and that they've exhibited in the meetings we've had with them. And I do want to make a point that we do have a statement of necessary work that was adopted in June, and we've asked DWR to prepare a revised version. So I just request that if we do consider this issue in the coming months or in the future, we do be cognizant of those efforts we're asking DWR to do. We keep asking for revisions to the statement of necessary work. So I wanted the board to be aware of that. So at this point, I think all the speakers, we can take questions or comments. I just ask that if you have a question for a particular speaker, just ask that speaker to come up and address your question to them. So thank you very much.
That's a lot to absorb. So board members' questions first of Mr. Zalazo or other staff. Questions of staff?
Comments, but no questions.
You don't have to if you don't want to. I'm absorbing. Member Countryman?
I'll have a comment.
All right, comments too.
It seems like we're talking past each other here. Staff and people have developed floodplains based upon what do the existing levees provide protection to. And the alternative one is when the flood control project was originally conceived, did it create a liability issue for these areas that are behind there, like Aiken's case, for instance? And I mean, I'm not an attorney, so my opinion doesn't have much to do, but it seems to me that if the levee failed and that area was flooded there, they might bring suit against the state, and the state, you know, there's a chance that the state would be fine liable and would have to pay damages like it did in the Aikens case. But they're two separate analyses. One is like, okay, does this existing levee provide protection to an area, and who all benefits from that? That's one analysis. The other analysis is, has a liability been created like he showed with the Natomas backwater situation, that the state might be found liable for in case of a failure? Those, and I mean, I feel like what the staff and DWR did is consistent with how they found other maintenance areas. In other words, you failed the levee, and then you don't fail the levee, who benefited? And that's what they've done in their analysis. They're not trying to address any original liability that the project may have acquired when it was constructed prior to the dams. But I understand, you know, what their proposal is. So I guess I would ask is, I mean, we already have found with the failure analysis what the area of benefit was. But that doesn't really address, is there a remaining liability? So that's what we have to come to grips with.
Thank you, Member Countryman. I think that was directed to us in our decision-making, but that's good. We appreciate you being on board. Okay. Any questions? I think we have audience members that have a question, Mr. Countryman. It doesn't look like there's questions for you, Mr. Zalazo. All right, wait, Member Bosler, you have questions? This is for staff, and then we're gonna get to the alternative.
I just wondered where the local maintaining agency was and why they didn't have a presentation today.
I don't know if you all heard that. Why isn't the local maintaining agency here today? Are you speaking of RD 784?
The ones that initiated this action.
Mr. Engler, are you RD 784?
I am RD 817.
Oh, you're 817. You're the ones that
We're the little piece,
you got added.
yeah, that joined
Okay.
in later.
All right, if you want to respond to that, you may.
I'm here. If you have any questions for us, I'd be happy to answer. I think it's a different case in RD 817 than it is in RD 784, but the reason we decided to join is because it doesn't make sense for RD 817 maintains levees in two different hydraulic basins. So we'd like to get rid of one of those basins if possible. It doesn't make a lot of sense to us why it was formed that way. And because RD 784 went forward with this, we just decided that it would be cleanest if there was one reclamation district or one maintaining agency in the Horseshoe Basin, so that it made sense to us.
There was a discussion of this a while ago. That's why 817 wanted to be added. There also was discussion even more a while ago why 784 wanted this to be detached from their RD.
We have one hand raised online, Patrick Meager.
What is the name?
Good morning, everybody. This is Patrick Marr, General Manager from RD 784. I just wanted to let the board know that I am present online today.
Member Bosler, do you want to restate that so he can hear it?
No, I mean, I think I just need to kind of rewind because I'm not intimately familiar, like some people on the board, with this region, and just need a little bit more kind of history about how we got to today and this proposal. I am generally been very supportive and around the consolidation of the different maintenance areas, reclamation districts. I think it allows us to think more broadly about solutions to difficult and challenging problems of flood control, and balancing all the different interests that we have. But I need a little bit of history about this proposal that I'm just lacking right here today.
Member Grego?
Thank you. So if I might add a little bit of history, this is my backyard that we're talking about. And so if I can, give a little bit of history and understanding, being the founding member of Three Rivers Levee Improvement, I could maybe provide some perspective. So the reason why we're here today is because there wasn't enough money in order for 817 and 784 to maintain this. The Western Interceptor has been around a long time. It was called the Arboga Slough, and that's where all the kids went to frogging and fishing, and that was their recreation in the South County. It was always had water in it. It was always there for those type of activities. But the Western Interceptor has been there for quite some time. And what Three Rivers did was to bring it up to standards, not only to the core 100-year standard, but to exceed that, because we knew, based on what happened in Natomas, that the standards change. And so we were really targeting for 200-year. And so those changes were made based on a requirement that the Corps of Engineers required from us as Three Rivers. It didn't show on the maps, but I think to give a better perspective of the lay of the land, is that alongside the Western Interceptor, as you drive north on Highway 70, is Highway 70. There's a huge infrastructure investment by the state of California for that highway, not just for commuters, but commerce and also evacuation routes. And so we talked about Highway North, 70 North before as evacuation route. Highway South is also an evacuation route. There's also a railroad that runs through there, the same thing. So back in the flood of 97, those were taken out of operation because of the failure on the Feather River levee breach. Nothing got past that area for weeks. And so I think that when you look at the Western Interceptor, it was more than just keeping water from, as they stated, from the houses in Plumas Lake. It was also protecting state infrastructure. So I wanted to kind of bring that perspective there. When Three Rivers took on the role of flood protection, it's a long story, and I don't think we all have the time to sit here to listen to it. But it was to bring flood protection for an area that really needed it. And so back in the 80s, that area of Plumas Lake was given development entitlements. And the reason why is because the FEMA maps did not show it was a flood hazard. They used that as a way of getting their entitlements. And so being on the Board of Supervisors, we had a tough decision to make. Do we fight entitlements that were given over 10 years ago in the courts? Or do we use the development in order to protect the people that will come and the people that are already there? That was a very tough decision, and we took a lot of criticism for it. But as you can see, I think we made the best bet when we decided to use development in order to secure the levees and put people that were there already and the people that were going to become into a safer environment, a safer place to live at. So those people that came, you know, we worked with the developers. In order to attract state money, we had to look at $30,000 for every house that came out there. They paid, the developers paid, and they financed this. And the people who live there are paying for it through assessments. And so, you know, I see it differently than it was been proposed today. I think there's a lot of history, and I think Board Member Countryman also brings up things that we need to take in consideration, because this is very precedent setting. What we decide here is going to determine a lot of precedent setting for other locations throughout the Central Valley. And I wouldn't be surprised if this lands in court. So we have to make sure the record is clear on this particular matter. So I'm going to stop there. If there's any questions that you have in regards to the area, I'd be happy to provide what knowledge I have about it. But I'm going to end with that.
Do you want to go before me?
I just was gonna offer to
Okay.
address
Mr. Dua, our board's attorney.
board member Bosler's first question is why the RDs are not here or didn't have a presentation. And that is because once they make the request of the board to form a maintenance area, then the roles and responsibility becomes the board's.
Thank you. Nothing becomes specifically clear to me today, so we'll see. Mr. Zalazo, Mr. Dua, anybody else? I've heard today that there were several meetings between those who presented an alternative and what was presented here today. Has staff, DWR, or who done an analysis as to why their concerns were not brought into it, and that the breach analysis was determined the best available information?
So we've had board staff have met with the affected landowners 3 times, and most of the information, most of the meetings have been focused on evaluating the landowners' analysis of this but-for levy condition. So we've been asking questions, getting information back and reviewing it. And we considered that information when preparing this our tentative proposal, if you would call it that. But we wanted to make sure that we stuck to the intent of California Water Code, which informing a maintenance area, which is what I already discussed, is if the levy were to fail, what would be the impact if the levy were to fail due to not being maintained.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Dua?
Thank you, President Dolan. I could just add a little bit more perspective to that as well in context, since Mr. Mike Zalazo has kind of recently taken over this role. As you might recall, Darren Soon was kind of our point person on this when the request was made from RD 784. And we've been having discussions certainly with Mr. Manning and Mr. Nevis's predecessor, the Gibbs previous council, and Stuart Hanson's previous council. And so I think what has happened is through the discussions over the past actually 5 years or so is we've gotten more information. They've refined what they provided to us. Today is the most complete, I would say, and certainly in the last several meetings that we've had with them over the last few months. And if you recall, the board directed board staff to continue to work as we have been, to try to find a resolution that we can all agree on as a path forward. And so that's why we are here today is, as I stated, what we've seen today from them has been kind of the most complete analysis on the request on the why they feel that a larger analysis, a larger and different analysis should be taken by the board. So it's really more, as I think Mr. Manning said, a policy issue for the board, and at least in this reach here, how should we approach this problem?
Okay, thank you for that. I did see some hands of others, so Mr. Zalazo, take a chair pretty close. Mr. Manning.
Yes, thank you. Just real quick. We want to avoid court, number one. We don't want to go to court. But I want to address something, Mr. Countryman, you said, and as always, very astute, caught on right what I'm saying, that yes, there's potential liability if these levees in the horseshoe failed. But my point is, the owner should not be asked to maintain the work to prevent the state's liability. If you're asking us to pay for something to prevent liability for the state. The private owner shouldn't pay for what the state would be liable for. That's our position. So, thank you. Happy to answer any other questions.
Member Johnson? That's what your face indicates you want to talk, please.
I might have questions for staff, but I have questions for Mr. Manning first, and then we'll see. So maybe I'll reserve the questions for staff for the appropriate time, but I definitely have questions for Mr. Manning when we get to that point. If that's where we are in the
Questions for Mr.
presentation,
Manning?
then yes.
Member Johnson to Mr. Manning.
Thank you for the presentation. I found it very, very interesting. I believe that I followed almost all of it. There was one part that I don't think I followed as you were describing the effect of the horseshoe levies on the rest of 784's freeboard. I did not follow that. It sounded like you were saying that the existence of the levy helped maintain freeboard for the other part of 784.
That's correct. So what I asked, because I know that there's an idea that, well, the east levee of the channel doesn't provide anything to the 784 Plumas Lake area because we have the west levee. And so I said to the hydrologist, well, what would happen if the horseshoe wasn't there? What would be the extent of the freeboard? Meaning, did the existence of the horseshoe get taken into account when analyzing the hydrology for the 200-year level of protection? And so I said, take that thing out. Take out the horseshoe. And what he found is, again, because the horseshoe creates what I'll call a dam and blocks the water, it's a big giant detention basin. And if that water were to, instead of backing up onto the horseshoe levee, it were to back up onto the west levee, the freeboard at the west levee would not meet the 3-foot criteria. It would be down a foot. And so that's why I asked him to do that.
I'm not sure I follow that. It seems to me that if the horseshoe levee would be putting more pressure on the east side of the Western Pacific Interceptor Canal, and if the horseshoe levee weren't there and it were functioning as a detention basin, as you say, and flooding land there, it would create less pressure on the rest of 784 and more freeboard for 784.
No, because it already does act as a detention basin. There's pictures that we have that show water in the horseshoe area at the top of essentially at the top of the east levee. What I'm saying is, if that water wasn't being held back by the east levee, and instead all that water went another 100 yards across the channel and then raised up on that levee instead, it wouldn't meet the 3-foot requirement.
Okay, I'm not sure I follow that, but so this could be a potential follow-up question for staff as part of a next presentation, the extent to which that's true, because I think if it would factor into the benefits and but-for analysis that staff is doing if the horseshoe levy is providing a benefit to people on the other side of 784. That's why I'm asking the question. And so maybe we could just park that as part of the follow-up, just.
Yeah, and
Because I think that part of it might be relevant to the benefits analysis, even if your theory of how the benefits analysis isn't conducted was where we went to it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And it's a layman trying to speak engineering. So, that's probably why I'm getting a confused look from the engineer, but, but I'm happy to have our engineers talk about exactly what they did and why they did it with, the other engineers. So, but I appreciate what you're saying.
Okay, and then my next question is just it goes to where this goes and who pays if the law dictates that we follow the analysis the way you're describing. I mean, I take it to mean that landowners within behind, for lack of a better word, east of the horseshoe levee, whose land wouldn't have flooded but for the creation of the rest of 784, and wouldn't pay. But people on that side of the horseshoe levee whose land would have flooded, but even would to some extent, but in proportion to, you're nodding so that I'll have the records for the transcript say that. But then are they then just paying the whole burden of the horseshoe levee at a higher rate because their property is the one that would have flooded either way?
No, that's not our position. And that's why, if that was our position, we wouldn't be working in coordination with those owners. Our position is that, yes, they were subject to some flooding, including my client, Mr. Rue and Mrs. Rue. So they should pay their fair share to the extent that they would be inundated based on kind of that zone of benefit analysis, which is the next step in this process. But I can also tell you this, that there are lands that my client owns that are not within 784 where he hasn't been paying an assessment that show that they would be inundated. So he's said, hey, that's true. If that's accurate, I'll pay for that, but I'm not going to pay for what has kept,
Okay.
if I've been dry.
I thought maybe that was the case. But then in your proposal, then who does pay? Is it all of the rest of 784? Because, or unit 145, I don't know if this is exactly can take the same thing at this point. Also people in the 817 part, or is it broader than that? Because, it's all part of the Sacramento River flood control and everybody who benefits from that. Is it the state, because the highway is there and that's a statewide benefit? Where does that stop in your analysis? For who pays?
That's a great question. I think it's all of those things. And what I would say is I've kind of thought about that. And what I would say is that I had that picture of the catchment that the interceptor intercepts and sends down. I'm thinking that anybody, including the state, who would be wet by those waters should have to pay for the redirection of those waters.
Okay. Because I think as a system as a whole, it has national value, right? And so I'm trying to get a feel for where this leads as a policy question, to the extent that it's a policy question and not something that we decide is just dictated by the water code and we don't have a choice. What consequences that would have for how we think about reclamation districts throughout the Central Valley?
Yeah, I think
is all of the maintenance federal then, because it all has a national benefit? Is the state paying all of it? Is it one big MA and everybody pays? How does this work?
Well, I think that in this situation, it is a rather unique situation because there are not many interceptors in the area. You know, take Natomas. The people that are upgrading of the Natomas East Main Drain, they don't pay to make sure that water doesn't go onto their lands with the levee over there on the east side. But I think it goes to you know, a discussion point earlier that, you know, the rural folks, it is a tough situation because the land values aren't there to support the extensive cost of maintaining levees. And so there's always been this discussion of creating a statewide maintenance area for those people. Maybe that's part of it. But in this situation, because of the unique nature of this being an interceptor channel, you know, I just don't think that the typical model that's done right now is appropriate. And so I don't think it sets this significant precedent because this isn't a typical situation. You don't have many man-made features like this throughout the Sacramento River Flood Control Project. You've got, you know, the east-west interceptor up by the Wadsworth Canal. The state of California pays for that under the water code. They pay for the both sides and including the channel. You've got the Natomas East Main Drain. Again, the owners over there on the upgradient don't pay for that. So there's very few intercepting channels in this project. It's mostly contained to, you know, the big tributaries. So I think that, you know, from a big policy standpoint, I think that get on my soapbox, but the maintenance area statewide for rural folks is critical. There's been a significant amount of studies done, documentation that has talked about rural levees, maybe changing the criteria. But I feel, as somebody who follows that quite extensively, it's stalled. It hasn't gone anywhere. And maybe this is a great impetus to carry that forward. It might be a small issue, you know, in the grand scheme of things, but it's a great time to pursue those avenues.
Okay, thank you. As we go forward, well, first of all, I don't want, don't take the questions as an answer on where I'm going with this. I'm trying to tease out consequences. I would appreciate though from you and also from staff as we get into next rounds, real clarity on who does pay. You know, is it existing 784? Is it, you know, a different map proportionate, how that would work, and what the principle is legally, and so that we can be talking about how that would have consequences for the rest of the system if that's what the law allows. And I don't know, we may be not that constrained. We may be more constrained than just being able to make decisions based on how we think the world ought to work. There's probably some rules about, you know, from the legislature that we're following before we get to that point. But I think it'd be very helpful for us to know exactly what the proposal is and how it limits. And I would say that too for board staff, you know, real clarity on what your eventual recommendation ends up being and why, and consequences for other places as well. Even if the consequences are described as background information, and not the decision, because you think the decision is more constrained by the law. I think it'd be good for us to know as we go forward what we're looking at here.
Okay, thank you. And I there's probably, if I don't have any more questions, I do want to say, I want to thank the board, staff, for all the attention that this is getting and the time that has been given to us. I know that it is important. And I just wanted to make sure that I was very clear and express my appreciation for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Johnson, for that. I really appreciate what you had to say. And I think that we ought to get a transcript of that and give it to staff. What I heard from staff is that you've kind of determined what you think is the best path so far. But I think we heard a lot of other things that need that analysis that Member Johnson is speaking about. Not to help us say we want to undo what you did, but to give more clarity to ultimately what our decision is. And I, for one, am not willing to do something quickly because the statement of work would have to be redone again. That's life in government. Because this is complicated. And it could mean the direction for other areas that either need an MA, need a more consolidated maintenance area, whether it be a RD or a state, and how we can go forward more appropriately for our future instead of looking at the past. So I associate myself with what you said. Thank you. You may keep going, Member Johnson.
I did think of one more question that I didn't ask. And I think this is for Mr. Zalazo, but all of you could answer. Toward the beginning of the presentation, there was a bullet that there was also a possible alternative for an easement. And I'm wondering if any of you would like to say any more about what that might be.
It's still, Mrs. Mike Salazzo, board staff, it's still in the early phases, but we're not ready to comment on what that might look like yet.
I didn't hear that at all.
But Mr. Dua, if you have.
Okay, I heard the term conservation easement as well. I didn't go any further. Mr. Dua.
I can speak to that just a bit, G to a board council. Yes, as part of the alternatives that the board directed staff to consider is, again, alternative resolution. And one of those proposed was perhaps partnering with a entity like the Nature Conservancy or River Partners and others that have interest in like multi-benefit type projects where and in this instance, maybe some type of habitat conservation or other conservation easement that would allow the land to flood and also operations to continue and get out of this perhaps loop of forming a maintenance area. And so that has been expressed to council for the landowners, and it is under consideration. And we would not be doing that work, but we would be making the introduction certainly to help try to flesh that out. So that is still up in the air.
You want to make that part of the discussion too? I'd forgotten that came up just very briefly.
I'll just say that it sounds like a plausible outcome that could make sense.
Could be some compensation to the landowners too.
And right, and it makes sense in the sense of you can imagine a world where the statewide benefit points to something in that direction, and also where your clients would say, okay, and also we should be compensated for that. So.
I need some help to draw this to a conclusion. I don't have a masterful thing to make us all feel better. Member Countryman.
I have a question for our staff or anybody that might know. The landowner that came forward and talked about, his survival and how they work out there, and that the cost of the assessment of this new maintenance area may have the potential for putting them out of business. Do we consider ability to pay at all when we do this? I mean, I think we had a situation up in Lake County where we put people out of, bankrupted them because they could not afford assessment to do the maintenance. And so this is concern to me. Is there, in the formation of the maintenance areas, is there any way to address that issue?
So Mike Salazzo, board staff, the text in the water code doesn't really account for the text in the water code doesn't account for the ability to pay, as far as I'm aware. But we can incorporate that into an analysis and present it to the board if the board chooses us to do so.
Does that come up when we talk about the statement of work?
The statement of work, it was just outlining the cost required for the state to maintain it up to certain standards. And I'm not certain if those costs are fixed, whether or not DWR can reduce those costs or fix only those things. But again, it wouldn't be compliant with the requirements of the state to maintain the levy system. So when discussing the statement of necessary work, and when the board adopted it back in June, there wasn't an analysis by DWR or the board staff in that document on the effect of the landowners.
As I understand this, the water code doesn't tell us whether we need to address that, but it also doesn't tell us that we can if we want. Doesn't address who pays and what the amount is at all. I think that's up to us. One more fun thing we can do.
President Dolan, I could add to that if you'd like.
Yeah, Mr. Dua.
Thank you. And so actually from the inception of this issue, that has really been, I think, part of the main crux of why we are here. And when we first met at the Sutter Club was, and I don't want to speak for the property owners, but as I understand it, they are not opposed that some do currently pay assessments and they're not opposed to paying assessments, but the potential assessment, as Mr. Countryman pointed out, is really what is driving this. And it could be so high that it makes things difficult or impossible for them to continue their operations. And so it has been an effort to try to find a way, again, to come to a resolution where the board can act on its statutory requirement when it's requested to form a maintenance area, but it, again, does not speak specifically on how to do that. And to answer the question about ability to pay, that is not a factor that's considered. But certainly that does not mean that the board can not consider that when deciding how it wants to proceed.
It's not that particular issue and the water code's response. I mean, that issue and the water code's response isn't unique to this area, right? The law now says X level of protection depending on, what part of the state we're at. And we have quite a few parts of the state where the beneficiaries, immediately behind the levees don't have the ability to pay or make a considered economic judgment that they would prefer not to. And we send them letters demanding that they do. I mean, there's a broader question here of what we're really, not, the board, but the state and the federal government and the locals and landowners are trying to get out of the system and what choices make the most sense under the circumstances, right?
Yes, if I could respond, I think, thank you. I think Board Member Griego made, kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of her experience with the Three Rivers and the decision to be made on how to pay for those improvements. And that's an issue that we've seen for a while now, is that urbanized areas have the ability to pay a certain amount and rural areas fall behind. And so it's a state issue. It's a funding issue, and there isn't something in place like we have in the Delta, a subventions program that helps offset some of those costs that fall on the agricultural areas. If in fact the state wishes to keep, ag, and prevent further development in the floodplain.
I'm just not sure how we can continue to belabor this, and I don't feel that we're ready to even give specific direction, but we certainly have indicated where our questions and our thought process is for staff to put your best legal and engineering mind on and give us another presentation at a meeting we decide. And in the meantime, anyone is welcome to direct questions directly to Mr. Salazzo. Don't send it to all of us because we'll be in this situation again.
Through the chair.
Member Gregory.
So it sounds like we're getting close to the end of this discussion. And so I would just like to ask staff that when we do make a date and determination to bring this back to the board, if we can possibly have that event in Yuba County to make it easy for any of the landowners to participate through this discussion. I think that would be a good idea. And it's something with what we've done in the past.
I concur. I don't know if I have the queen mantle to say we're gonna do that.
But we have gone to Marysville and Yuba City before when it's been pertinent to that area. So you'll see when that will be. Are we ready to move on? You wake over here? Ready to move on? You ready to move on? Thank you for that. I am required to ask if there's any public comment. Now we've asked staff, we've asked those who represent landowners. Is there anyone else that wants to talk about this? Bring a comment forward or a question to us? No one's brave enough, huh? I really, truly am inviting you if you wish to. Are there any hands up? Chavez?
There are no hands raised online.
And no chats? Are there any chats? No. Okay.
There are.
They are not. So we will thank you all. We will see you all at some point in the future, probably not next week.
Yeah. I just want to thank the board for their thoughtful comments on this, and we'll take those into consideration before we come back next time.
Thank you for saying that. I saw you making notes. Good. Okay. Let me see here. We're on 11, staff activity reports. We have written updates of activities from our various divisions and branches for the last week. Executive staff, which came yesterday afternoon, administrative division, pretty busy over there, administrative division. Operations branch, flood system improvement branch, natural resources management and planning division. The longest one there. Anybody want to bring forward a highlight on them? Mr. Countryman.
I would like to have the operations branch in that written report. Earlier in our meeting, Tom Engler talked about 200 permits in the queue, so forth. I'd like if the operations branch could come forward and talk about that chart that is in their report. It shows the breakdown of what those 200 are and so forth. Can we do that? We could ask Tom to review the report, I guess, but
I had the piggyback because I know we heard about the innovation of the concurrent review, and I just wondered how to read that chart if some of these permits are at U.S. Army Corps and with us at the same time. I think that would be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Countryman. Steve Lamb,
Mr.
Permitting
Lamb.
Section Operations Branch. I don't have the latitude to have a PowerPoint or a way to present the data that Mr. Countryman is speaking to. So I'm going to have to go off of a little bit of memory and some hyperbole that you have it in front of you. So of the 208, 210 or so permits that we currently have in review under staff review, roughly 20% of them are within the board's hands at the moment for review. And those could be in various contexts. They could be in early submittal. They could be awaiting review by additional staff. So about 20% of them are in-house. The remaining, I'm trying to go off of what I wrote about a month ago. So bear with me if my factors are a little bit off. The remaining roughly, I think it's about 25% or with the core. And Mr. Countryman, could you, what's the first, do you have about a percent or 82? 82 of 208. So a bit more. And so those are in, again, they've been transmitted to the core. The board has completed their completeness review and compliance review with Title 23. Now we're working with the Corps of Engineers to get through the 408 process. And so those applications may be under review at the Corps. They may have additional items that they're going through. A litany of other situations could be happening at the Corps by which we don't at the state have a lot of control over. There's a remaining about 8 to 10% that may be with the applicants, where we have asked them for additional information as part of our compliance review, where the information has been requested for additional information from the Corps of Engineers. And so this process is a little sloggy. It takes a little bit to get through it. A lot of it is not borne on our board staff. There are multiple factors. There's board staff, there's Corps of Engineers conducting their review, there's the applicant themselves. And then we have a small percentage where we're pushing the projects through our administrative process. They're at the finish line, really. We're waiting for signatures, and that's a real snapshot because our management team does get through these pretty quick. And so when that data is collected, it is a real brief snapshot. It's going on day in, day out. We're signing permits, we're getting stuff out. So take that as that epic. Otherwise, like I said, I think we're looking to streamline, we're looking to keep our policies and our processes moving. Additionally, we have a good number of minor alterations and maintenance requests. We're looking to keep things out of the permitting realm, right? We're looking to be innovative and look to our code to say, does this need a permit? How can we expedite this levee safety projects through? So I hope that answered your question, Mr. Countryman.
Well,
Mr. Countryman?
thank you for that, but the bottom line to Tom's question is that 20% of those 200 are currently with the board staff. Everything else is not with the board staff. So the 200, it's like 40 permits are with the board staff and 160 are either at the Corps or sent back to the applicants. And so, because it's like kind of a misrepresentation to say that we have 200 permits that aren't being processed. We are processing them. And currently there's 40 that are in our hands that we're working with.
I also want to point out that our meeting workshop of December 6th is when each one of our divisions and branches present their year-end report. So I could do that. And I did before, so I will again. Posted executive officer delegated reports, year-to-date 90 were issued. Didn't come to us. Didn't have to have presentations and hearings. Didn't have to wait for the board. So we have some innovations, but we also have limited staff.
Yeah, and I think the number is slightly inflated at the 200 because we do have currently about 30 permits happening in the West Sacramento area that are for home sites that are basically equivalent, which the board will be seeing. And I'm sorry. So there's home sites up there in West Sacramento. So they're 30 individual permits, but we're reviewing them contiguously, right? As one review. So the numbers look a little inflated at 30. And once, if those come to the board, you know, that we're going to see a real quick drop. And we continually note that in our presentation to the board, that 30 of these were received back in November of 2023, and we're working on it. So I don't want to see big shifts like there's funny business, we're cooking the books, right? I want to be transparent and show why did this climb so much in 1 month versus, or why does it drop so rapidly in 1 month, right? I don't mind being the hero, but if it doesn't work, I want to be transparent with it. Thank you.
Do we know if the Corps is funded? I know their new fiscal year has started to do permit reviews and so forth. Is there any hope that we can get these through the Corps more promptly? I mean, that's the bulk of the permits. They're at the Corps of Engineers. So unless we can get the Corps of Engineers to more rapidly review and get out these reports, we can't improve our performance, I don't think.
I have spoken with the Corps, and this last year they did have a funding shortfall. And in times, again, I don't want to fully speak with them, but through my conversations, in former times of shortfall, they have been pencils down. The new Corps approach is to either redirect some staff to keep things slightly rolling, not going to zero, right? They redirect staff to maybe inspections, so they're not in one unit RMC funded, that's a detriment to the whole unit. But we're getting 1, 2, 3, 4 permits instead of maybe 8, 10, 12, right? And so I think that's a great advancement that the Corps has been working on to keep the train moving, right? And so that's the most I know. I don't know about this year's fiscal. Of course, it just came out in October. I haven't heard anything likewise that we're going to have a shortfall with the Corps. But from us, we just keep sending them over, and hopefully we can free up the logjam with them.
Mr. Countryman, more? Okay. Yeah, thank you.
I would just like to suggest that maybe another line get added to the spreadsheet that says, you know, the ones that are on joint review, like concurrent review. Because I think that's really important that we, you know, we're not sitting on it for 3 months, because that's how long it takes us to do it and then sending it. If we're doing this concurrent review, I mean, that is viewed by the people who are waiting as, oh, okay, it's in process in both places.
So a majority of the encroachment permit reviews that go through the permitting section shop, they are not concurrent review. The flood system improvement branch, Greg's group, they tend to have a more concurrent review because they are 30, 60, 90, 100 progressions, where our reviews are conducted oftentimes at 65, 100% drawing level. And that progression, we're like the first stop. If we can clear a lot of the Title 23 hurdles and compliance, 9 times out of 10, they meet the technical specifications and compliance at the Corps. So having them concurrent would make it more disruptive because we would be commenting on the same things. And so making it, we do what we can. There are instances where we do move forward as Greg's group does at the flood system improvement, if they're unique situations. We've had some with PG&E where it's a unique situation where we might not have all the biological stuff in-house, but a lot of the technical stuff we're good. And so we have done those concurrently with our environmental sciences group as we work through some of the environmental studies and things of that nature. But they're rare because it takes us out of continuity when we have to do it.
Very helpful. I suspect you didn't anticipate that there would be this question. So you did very well. Thank you very much.
I got here.
You've got it all right there. So yeah, okay. Thanks for
Thank you
for stepping up. Okay, I think that concludes our item number 11, staff activity reports. No more questions on the others? Okay, we'll look forward to the UN reports. Anyone have a comment or question you'd like to make on the staff activity reports? No hands up in the room that I see. Any hands up online?
There are no hands raised online.
None. Thank you for that. Item 12 is board comments, upcoming committee updates. We have some of that there. I just want to tell you that I was joined by, I shouldn't say Mr. Boston, executive officer, but I did give a bit of a talk at the Smith Canal ribbon cutting of the gate completion and the ceremony associated with that. Deputy Executive Officer and I think some other staff, we're going to go to the Delta Plan Implementation Committee. I know I'm missing a P and an I, but we're going to be doing that. It's Monday. Monday. Yeah, we're meeting at Costco at 9 a.m. And then we're heading to the Delta. Okay, so what else is there? I'm going to be attending the Water Education Foundation next week. And anybody else got some committees or things going on? Yes, please say what you're going to do. Mr. Countryman.
I think we're gonna be together Monday at the, I'm not exactly sure what. the name-
We say DPIC and it means Delta Plan something committee.
Right.
And you're a esteemed panel member.
Oh, good, that's because I'm in the lower Sacramento. Anyway, yesterday at the Stewardship Council meeting, they had a Levy 101 course. And I made a presentation along with Tom Zuckerman and the Wendy Wang for the state plan. And I just want to report, the Stewardship Council was extremely receptive to what we had to say about the levies. Sometimes in the past, you know, they question if we should really have the subventions program or not and things like that. And that wasn't there. They were like, yeah, that's like a very important program. And it's one thing that's really saving the Delta as it's currently constituted right now. So I really thought that positive vibe that we got back and the different members of the staff asked really good questions and so forth. So I just wanted to report on that.
Thank you. I can't believe anyone would question the suspension program. It's a lifesaver, literally. Okay, anyone else doing things? Member Grego?
Thank you. I just want to take a minute to brag on my community. The Yuba Water Agency put out a newspaper and our President Dolan has a copy of it. And it's in regards to Flood Awareness Week. They did an excellent job of providing a nice little paper for all of us in the county to talk about flood control. And they've got valuable information of what to do in the event. And I think they really went over and above. I thought Willie was running for office because I saw his picture and all his quotes. I was like, wow, when did this happen? But reading further into it, I determined that this was for Flood Awareness Week. So I just wanted to share that with you. Also, I want to thank staff for arranging for a tour for the Ring Levee. I've been watching this constantly because I go over that bridge, you know, several times a day and watching the progress that this project is having. And I asked, I said, I'd like to take a tour of it. So I know Tom is involved in that as well. Yes, thank you very much. And so I'm looking forward on November 1st, and I hope that anybody that would like to join would be there.
Well, we can't have a quorum without everybody else coming. You're talking about the Marysville Ring
The
Levee.
Marysville Ring Levee, yes, thanks. And then I didn't get a chance to comment on, but I just want to also thank staff on the letter to the Corps in regards to the efficiencies. I read it thoroughly, and I want to thank you, Chris, and your staff for presenting that, and also going beyond that to look for remedies of how to transition through this process a little bit smoother with the Corps. So they were really good points that was made, and I appreciate that. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Anyone want to comment on board's comments? Public comment? None there. Any hands up?
There are no hands raised on.
Hands up. Upcoming meetings, our next meeting will be November 15th. That is the only meeting in the month of November. It's November 15th because there's just a lot of beginning and ending other things that people do in November. So no workshop then. After that, board workshop on December 6th. 2024 year-end reports and reviews and discussion with our staff. That is the agenda item for that. And then board meeting for business on December 13th. And then we will not be back until January. I wanted to also remind everyone that the coordinating committee just couldn't settle on a date and acceptable to presenters for either November or December. So the next coordinating committee will be in January. November, December are tough to find a date because of the holidays. So that's it. No closed session, no report. Anything else for the good of the order? It's asleep. Meeting adjourned.